Here's the problem. Here's the problem. Running. You need to stop that.
You run every day.
Good morning. It is Monday, January 8th, 2024. Happy New Year to everybody. This is a workshop meeting of the Commissioners of the City of Rehoboth Beach. We're live at City Hall, second floor. I'd like to call this meeting to order at 9 o'clock on the dot. And would you please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. We'll start off with roll call and the commissioners. Commissioner Don Preston.
Here.
Commissioner Tony Sharp.
Here.
Commissioner Ed Stranowski.
Here.
Commissioner Patrick Gossett.
Here.
Commissioner Tim Bennett.
Here.
Commissioner Bunky Markert.
Here.
Mayor Stan Mills. We've got a full complement of the mayor and commissioners are able to formally conduct business as we have a quorum today. I'd also like to introduce staff. It takes staff to help run this meeting. And from left to right here, we've got Matt Janis, Building and Licensing Supervisor, Scott Cantalupo, Building and Licensing Code Enforcer, and Womack, City Secretary. On my left, Interim City Manager, also Assistant City Manager, Evan Miller. On my right, Alex Burns, City Solicitor. Over here, Chief Banks, Chief of the Police Department. Sorry.
There's many.
Which one? Choose one. Pick one. Executive Secretary Margaret Carson. Over against the wall, Kevin Williams, Public Works Supervisor. We have a new guest to introduce in a minute. June Embert, Parking Department Supervisor. Lynn Cohen, Communications Specialist. And we've got a whole gang of police here that we'll introduce in a little bit. With that, we'll move on to a welcome. We've got a new director of the Rehoboth Beach Museum, and we'd like to welcome and introduce Heidi Nastrom Evans and David Mann, who is president of the Museum and Historical Society. Go ahead and tell us a little about yourself.
Hi, I'm David Mann. I'm just beginning my 5th year as the president of the board of the museum. Last summer, we had the misfortune of losing our director of 15 years, Nancy Alexander. And over the course of the summer, I learned about job descriptions, job postings, museum associations, and many other things that I had not known before. So we engaged in a national search for a new director. And over the course of the summer and into the fall, we had responses from as far away as Texas, Indiana, Miami, Florida, and ended up with 7 people that were of merit that we interviewed, and then got extremely fortunate. I can't say how fortunate we are because I start to exaggerate too much, but Heidi Evans, Nastrom Evans, is right here on Rodney Street. And so as I said in my press release, we found her right down the avenue. So we're moving in a, I would say, better direction, forward thinking, longer term planning, doing things that were not really considered to be a focus, such as a strategic plan, which we're going to secure funding for and then execute. So we have a lot going on, and I'm going to let Heidi tell you all the rest.
Thank you, David, and hello, everybody, and thank you for the wonderful welcome this morning. It's a beautiful day, and I was blessed this morning to watch the sunrise over Rehoboth Beach. So it reminds me, and I know you all feel the same way. I know everybody who lives here feels this way. When you're able to see that, you're reminded of why we live here. And so my entire career, I spent the bulk of it in Washington, D.C., working at the Smithsonian at a graduate program in History of Decorative Arts, driving back and forth to the beach, wishing that I could be here full time, wishing that there might be an opening at the Rehoboth Beach Museum, and wouldn't that be nice? And it finally happened after I already had moved here full time. So I am so excited to be the new director at the Rehoboth Beach Museum. We have a lot planned. For example, today we're going to skedaddle as soon as I'm done saying hello to you all, and thank you for having me here, because we have Senator Russ Huxtable and Representative Pete Schwarzkopf coming to the museum this morning to talk to us about grant and aid and how we might partner better with the state. I've already had the good fortune to meet with a number of the commissioners and with Mayor Mills and Manager Miller and Commissioner Markert. And I'm looking forward to spending some more time with the other city commissioners and getting to know you all better. So please reach out to me at the Rehoboth Beach Museum if you think there's a way for us to work together or something that I can help you with. And thank you for this opportunity to introduce myself.
Thank you, Heidi. Anybody up here have a question? Commissioner Sharp?
I do. Welcome aboard, Heidi. I'm kind of curious when you were hired.
November 6th was my start date, but at that point, I was only coming in 3 days a week because I have been working on a really wonderful project with Dell Tech. We're turning Senator John J. Williams' house in Millsboro into a house museum, and when I got the job offer at Rehoboth Beach Museum, they were kind enough to allow me to spend November and December finishing up the interpretive script for that exhibition, which is going to open in June 2024 somehow. At this point, I'm working on it at night with the designer so we could finish it. But so, to make a long story short, I was there from November 6th, working 3 days a week. And so as of January 1st, now I'm here 5 days a week.
Thank you. That information is very helpful. I had no idea.
I had emailed you and invited you to come up and visit with me. So
Yes, you
I
did.
hope that you take that opportunity when you have a moment, and I can show you around and tell you about what our plans are.
I have some very, very specific ideas
Oh,
for
great.
the Historical Society. And since you called out the fact that I did not respond to your email, I will say to you that I had no idea what your name was. And since I did not have that, I don't respond to emails where I don't know people.
Oh, okay.
So
Good to know.
one of the things I had been asking for the last couple of meetings was, did anybody on the commission get a formal announcement from the Historical Society? And to my knowledge, that was not the case. So I acknowledge that how all this happened, and it's a learning, I think, and welcome aboard. I think you have your work cut out for you, and I'll be talking to you at another time.
Great. Well, I guess I wasn't familiar with the processes that you use, but now that you've told me, I'll be sure to go about things that way. So thank you for that welcome.
Thank you. Anybody else? Thank you, Heidi. Thank you, David, for coming here. I know you need to rush off and seek that grant money.
Yep, thanks.
Thank you. Thank you. Besides thanking them, I'd like to thank everybody in attendance today. We welcome you at certain times during the meeting. We will offer opportunity for you to provide feedback. Let's see, I also want to thank everybody that's watching virtually. And I want to remind everybody that we have what we call support documents. They are documents that help support our discussion of agenda topics. And when they're ready in advance of a meeting, they are embedded into the agenda. So if you learn to go to www.cityofrehoboth.com, on the homepage, right side center, there's a lime green box called Legislative Portal. Click on that, and in the top right corner, there's a calendar. Click on that calendar for your meeting date, and you'll be able to click on and bring up the agenda with attached support documents or embedded support doc. That way, you're able to see most of what we are able to see up here. I would like to exercise the chair's prerogative and change the sequence of the agenda today. The next item of business, or the first item of business before our first item of old business will be new business A, which is discuss possibility of signing into a community benefits agreement between U.S. Wind and the city of Rehoboth, so that we can get that out of the way and let the U.S. Wind representative go on his way. So the next item of business is correspondence, and I don't have any correspondence identified. The next on our docket is city manager's report.
Thank you, Mayor. Good morning, Mayor, Commissioners, and members of the public. Happy New Year, everyone. It is my pleasure this morning to announce that our new Public Works Director, Henry Matluj, is coming on board today, and he is here with us today in this meeting, sitting next to Kevin. A Navy and 23-year Disney veteran, Henry brings with him a great deal of experience in engineering, leading teams, managing budgets, and solving complex problems. He and his wife, Connie, recently moved into their new home in Lewis, along with their Shih Tzu, Tashi. Henry is joining us as Kevin Williams has announced his intention to play more golf, a lot more golf. And Kevin will be retiring again soon. But first, he's going to spend some time helping Henry get settled in. So welcome, Henry.
What? Stand up there, Henry. Thank you.
Sposato is scheduled to install sod at the Scarborough Avenue Extended Park today and the terracotta fountain in the Garden of the Navigators on Lake Gerard tomorrow. The fountain was created by Enzo Zago and donated to the city by our sister city Greve and Chianti. Our thanks to the Rehoboth Beach Sister Cities Association for paying for the installation of that fountain. Mary Ellen Gray and Corey Shinko from our Building and Licensing Department will attend the January 13th Rehoboth Beach Homeowners Association meeting to provide attendees with an overview of the basement topics that have been presented to the Board of Commissioners over several meetings. Following our last presentation of the Board of Commissioners, we felt additional outreach to the homeowners was important to help convey the topic, address the questions, and also seek input. An update on the diorama, City Solicitor Alex Burns has finalized the draft MOU that will bring Paul Lovett's diorama to Rehoboth Beach City Hall. The next steps are for me to review the MOU before providing it to Paul. The plan is to host the diorama in the atrium area here at City Hall. This winter, the wastewater department's inspection and cleaning of sewer mains will take place in the North Shores area. The work, which will require about 10 days, is scheduled to begin next week. North Shores officials will handle communications with its residents. A reminder that city offices will be closed next Monday, January 15th, in observance of Martin Luther King Jr. holiday. Residential trash will not be collected next Monday. A citywide trash collection has been scheduled for Tuesday, January 16th. Finally, there is a proclamation included in the agenda recognizing National Law Enforcement Appreciation Day. At this time, I'd like to invite Chief Keith Banks and our members of the police department who are with us here today to the front and ask Mayor Mills and Vice President Gossett to read the proclamation.
Gentlemen, come right back here. First off, I'd like to have Chief Banks introduce everybody.
Good morning. This is indeed an honor and privilege to be here this morning. And standing to my left, I have Lieutenant Will Sullivan, Sergeant Brian Kazmarchuk. I have Corporal Curtis Ave. We have PFC Joseph Mulhern and Detective Brian Reynolds with us here today. So thank you for having us.
We appreciate you joining us today. Here we are to present a proclamation about National Law Enforcement Appreciation Day on January 9th, 2024, which is tomorrow, of course. Whereas we recognize and honor the selfless and heroic service provided by the men and women of the Rehoboth Beach Police Department, and whereas law enforcement officers of every rank and file have chosen a profession that puts their life on the line every day for their communities, they've answered a call to public service that is demanding and often unappreciated. Whereas we rely on the law enforcement officers to keep our neighborhoods safe, enforce our laws, and respond in time of crisis. And whereas every day law enforcement officers throughout the nation face the threat of violence and danger, routinely putting their lives in jeopardy to defend others, putting themselves at risk of injury, disability, or even death. And whereas the Rehoboth Beach Police Department has made and continues to make important changes in policy, policing, and transparency, including the enhancement of services with professional development opportunities, leadership training, and community outreach. And whereas these men and women, by their distinctive service and dedicated efforts as law enforcement officers, have earned our highest respect and deepest gratitude. Now, therefore, we, Mayor Stan Mills and Vice President Commissioner Patrick Gossett, do hereby proclaim Tuesday, January 9th, 2024, as National Law Enforcement Appreciation Day in the city of Rehoboth Beach, in honor of our law enforcement officers, past and present, who have established themselves an enviable and enduring reputation for preserving the rights and security of all Rehoboth Beach citizens. Proclaim this 8th day of January 2024. Congratulations, gentlemen. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you.
And I'd just like to thank the public and the mayor and commissioners for all their support to the police department over the years. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
At this time, Mayor, I'll take any questions on the city manager's report.
I have two quick clarifications. On the diorama,
Yes.
I am pleased that the MOU is moving forward, and I was wondering, what is the length of time that is going to be looked at? Because I'm a big proponent of the city stepping in and being a bridge to a permanent location, so I'm wondering how that's been handled.
Sure. Certainly, I'm open to any length of time that the commissioners might recommend, but I was initially going to start with 3 months.
Oh, that's great. Thank you. And the other question I have is just about the last couple of meetings, or at sometime this fall, I remarked on the new tree code that we have, and I just don't want the fact that we had talked some time ago about having a guide to the new tree code, and I didn't want that to get lost in the shuffle.
Sure.
So is it in someone's hands or not quite yet?
Yeah, so I did receive sort of the draft homeowner's guide to trees from Liz Lingo before she had stepped down as city arborist. Liz is also consulting with us currently for arborist duties. So my next step is to get with Mary Ellen Gray and continue to make sure that that guide moves forward and is something that we implement. So we do have a draft ready. It's just pushing it through to final.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Also, I have a couple questions, if I may. Also on the diorama, it's a 90-day period that we're looking at for the housing of it here at City Hall. But along, excuse me, with the presentation of the MOU at the next meeting, I would also like to see what the other options are, what's going to happen on day 91 as to the alternatives for the placement of the diorama. Because again, I don't want to have to come back in 90 days. It's like, well, let's extend this for another 90 days, whether that be an option or not. But some alternatives as to what happens after we're the placeholder for the period of 90 days. Sure. Secondly, over the weekend,
I'm sorry, well, I think we need to be mindful that Paul has some responsibility there
well, I,
also. But
I would ask anybody that
Yeah.
is involved in this, I compare this somewhat to the Dolly sign, is that this is not owned by the city. It is owned by a private individual, and, we are taking a step to have an interlude in that place because of the buildings that we own. There's a responsibility of giving the tenant what they need as a landlord. But again, I think that we need some factual steps that could take place at the end of 90 days, and who makes those decisions at that period of time. So a path forward as opposed to just kicking the can. Second question is, walking around this weekend at the, I see we're making some progress at the Beach Patrol building, but I also would like to, I appreciate we advertising for the company that's doing the work there, but I would also like to see if we could do something of sort of a what's going on sign, since this is going to be there for a period of time through the summer, as to whether there's the old phrase of your tax dollars at work or what have you, but some explanation to not only our residents but our visitors as to why this building is being wrapped in fencing and signage.
Sure. Thank you, Commissioner. One thing that I will mention is anybody who's visited the site recently, especially the site from the Boardwalk, will see that the fencing is up and screening is up. The screening right now has the company logos on it. We have actually worked with Delmarva Veteran Builders to add screening to the remainder of the fence that will highlight the Beach Patrol and the new Beach Patrol building. There will be 2 screens that are photos of the Beach Patrol in action that were taken recently, I think actually this past summer. It also includes the 100th anniversary of the Beach Patrol logo on those images. And then 2 other pieces of the screening will include an image of the rendering for the Beach Patrol project and indicate that is the future home of the Rehoboth Beach Patrol. So we are working on that, Commissioner.
Great. And to follow up on that also, at some point in the future, will we have an report, if you will, or statement of how we're going to proceed with relocation of the Beach Patrol headquarters and alternate
Yes.
bathroom facilities?
Yes.
Great. Thank you.
Evan, just one addition. At our meeting, our status update meeting last week, we discussed adding a QR code to the signage at the site that will take folks to Reach Out Rehoboth, where status updates will be provided.
Okay. Thank you, Lynn.
Thank you.
Thank you.
anybody else? Thank you very much. With that, we'll move on to city manager's report, city solicitor's report, please.
Thank you, Mayor. The only thing I have is a brief update on the quiet title action relating to the lots C and D for the railroad property. The court order from Magistrate David requested that the city notice the upcoming hearing that's on February 24th, and that is a rule to show cause hearing. So if anyone objects to the quiet title action, it's their opportunity to go and present reasons why. And so the city has taken steps to notice that hearing. We posted public notice on the property itself, thanks to Building and Licensing. And we've also arranged in the Delaware State News, an advertisement will run once a week for 3 consecutive weeks, essentially just publishing the court order. And that's all I have.
Thank you. Anybody else?
Mr. Mayor, Delaware State News, local paper.
What about, what,
Was recorded.
Yep, the court requested publication in the Delaware State News.
They requested it.
Correct.
And the Cape Gazette? And the Cape Gazette?
No.
Why not?
It's just what the court order says.
But we have the ability to supplement that, and we could also advertise in the Cape Gazette. I
Absolutely.
would suggest doing that on a Friday edition to parallel with the 3 insertions in the Delaware State News.
your microphone there?
Sorry. I would suggest again, just to
Let's
repeat.
do that. Let's supplement it with the Cape Gazette. Good idea. At the end of the city solicitor's report? Very good. Thank you very much. And with that, as I said, we are going to move on to reschedule our agenda. resequence our agenda so that we are now covering new business A, discuss possibility of signing into a community benefits agreement between U.S. Wind, Inc. and the City of Rehoboth Beach via a stream of annual payments over 20 years worth $2 million. Earlier, I mentioned support documents. We have two support documents for this agenda topic embedded in the agenda. One is a press release from U.S. Wind, and the second is the actual draft proposed community benefit agreement. If you recall, I know we've got some new faces here, and usually what that means is some typically out-of-towners coming in and wanting to offer feedback, and that's certainly welcome. We welcome you here. I want to remind everybody that on September 22nd, I believe it was, late September 2022, we had a wind workshop, and our speaker today was attendance there and participated. Since that workshop, we've had two committees, the Environment and the Boardwalk and Beach Committee, look at wind farms and come up with some of their ideas on it. Board of Commissioners have yet to analyze or form opinions on whether U.S. Wind project or the Orsted project that's pending. The U.S. Wind project is about, 26 miles from Rehoboth Beach, is relatively out of sight compared to the view shed of Ocean City, Maryland and Fenwick Island, Maryland. And of course, the Orsted wind farm is pending off our own shore. The intent of today's topic is a conversation with U.S. Wind as their project moves forward. And the question, are we, the city, amenable to the proposed community benefits program offered by U.S. Wind? The U.S. Wind representative is Mike Dunmeyer. Raise your hand there. He's going to be standing up in a minute. Again, he presented at the September 22, 2022 session. My intent today is not to receive comments of support or skepticism for the wind farm, but rather to learn about the proposed agreements and then receive comments on whether or not to further consider the proposal of the community benefits agreements. So please understand what our target is today. I'd like to approach this in two parts, and Mike leading off both parts. Begin with an introduction, or for some of us, reintroduction into the U.S. Wind project. And then the second part, an introduction to the proposed community benefits agreement between U.S. Wind and Rehoboth Beach. And by the way, is similarly offered to Henlopen Acres, Dewey Beach, Bethany Beach, and South Bethany. And so, Mike, I'll turn it away to you. If you would introduce yourself again in your official title with U.S. Wind, and then we'll let you get to it.
Sounds good. Thank you very much, Mayor Mills. So my name is Mike Dunmeyer. I work for U.S. Wind. I'm their Delaware Development Manager, which essentially means this is what I do. I come out into the public. I want to make sure that the facts are out there so that folks can make the appropriate determinations based upon those facts. I live here locally in Lewis and also have a home in Dewey Beach. So like all of you, I care very deeply about this area, and that's really why I'm here. As Mayor Mills alluded to, we wanted to begin with a refresher on the project. So for some of you, this will be an update. For some of you, new business. And Mayor Mills took away a little bit of my thunder right away. So I always want to start because there's some confusion at times. There are actually two offshore wind developers in the area with two separate lease areas. The one that I think is more well-known is the area that is essentially off the Delaware coast from Rehoboth down to Bethany, and that's controlled by Orsted and referred to as Skipjack. My company, U.S. Wind, holds the rights to a lease area that comes as far north as the Fenwick Island latitudes and then extends southeasterly along the Maryland coast. So everything I'll be talking about today concerns that southern lease area belonging to U.S. Wind. So we have won awards from the state of Maryland that would allow us to develop about 1,100 megawatts of offshore wind. That's enough to provide the power for more than 340,000 area homes while also displacing about 2.5 million tons of carbon dioxide each year. And U.S. Wind can do this with 76 turbines and 3 offshore substations. And if our plans as proposed were approved, the layout that you see on this image is what we would use to deliver that power. And in that layout, as Mayor Mills mentioned, the closest turbine to Fenwick Island would be 15 miles away, 17 to Bethany, 24 to Dewey, and 26 to Rehoboth. You'll also notice on this slide that there's a large open area in the northwest quadrant of the lease area. That represents our excess capacity. And we have not won any awards that would enable us to develop this area at this point. But if future opportunities to compete did arise, we would do so. So it's reasonable to expect that that area could be built out as well. If it were, the distances from the nearest turbine to each one of those towns would decrease by about 4 miles. And since there's a high likelihood that that area could be developed, in our permitting process, U.S. Wind is seeking to permit the entire lease area. And that could hold as many as 121 turbines and 4 offshore substations. We're seeking to do this because this allows the government at the federal level and the state level to address the project's highest potential impact and understand that as they make their decisions. Now, with this process, there's something called a project design envelope where BOEM asks us, BOEM is our primary regulator, the Bureau of Ocean Energy Management, BOEM asks us to provide a couple alternatives in different areas. And some of the more relevant alternatives that are out there, first of all, we're looking at 2 different turbine models. One is a commercially available 14.7 megawatt turbine that at its highest point, i.e. with one of the turbine blades sticking straight up, would be 817 feet above mean sea level out in the lease area. The second turbine type that we're looking at is just in development right now. It would be an 18 megawatt turbine that at its highest point would be 938 feet above mean sea level. We can only consider what we put in our plans. These are the only 2 turbines that are in our plans. There's no possibility of any larger turbine being out there. Generating all this energy is great, but it means nothing if we don't connect it to the grid. And so we have proposed in our plans connecting to a substation that exists that's managed by Delmarva Power and Light that's adjacent to the coal plant out in Dagsboro. And to get there, we have proposed 2 potential points of landfall, one at Tower Road just south of Dewey and one at 3 R's Beach just south of Indian River Inlet. From each of those 2 potential points of landfall, there are a total of 5 potential cable corridors that would take the power from that point of landfall out to the Dagsboro substation. 4 of those are terrestrial that would follow along rights-of-way in the roads in the area, and 1 would continue to bury the cables going across Indian River Bay. U.S. Wind has identified in our plans that our preferred approach would be to make landfall at 3 R's Beach, to continue burying the cables moving across Indian River Bay, and then connect up to that substation adjacent to the power plant. We believe that is the, by far and away, the least impactful way to do this, and we can do so safely and responsibly. It's also important to note that the cables will be buried along that entire route. There will be no above-ground infrastructure between the wind farm and where they ultimately connect out at that substation. And to do that, we'll use a low-impact trenching method to bury the cables about 6 feet beneath the seabed until we get to about 1,000 feet from the coast, at which point we'll switch to horizontal directional drilling, which will enable us to send the cables 60 feet beneath the beach and dune without coming into contact with those sensitive ecosystems, and also by doing that, by burying the cables 60 feet deep, starting 1,000 feet off the coast. We also take away any possibility that those cables could become exposed along the shoreline through wave activity, storm activity, things like that. And we'll use that same approach, the horizontal directional drilling, to send the cables underneath of the wetlands areas at the east and west coasts of Indian River Bay. So again, to avoid making any contact with those sensitive ecosystems. So the permitting process is quite robust, as it should be, and it really revolves around the creation and analysis of U.S. Wind's construction and operations plan. This is a large set of documents that goes into great detail about really everything that we're going to do and how we're going to do it. Of note, it identifies all of the potential risks that we would run into through our activities, and importantly, what we would do to either avoid or mitigate those risks.
It also will show you all of the research we either conducted ourselves or relied upon in putting these plans together, and gives you everything you need to know about the whole process from construction, installation, operations and maintenance of the facility for its life, which could be as long as 30 or 40 years, and then ultimately at the end, decommissioning, where we will remove all of the components from the wind farm. And fortunately, well over 90% of wind turbine components are now recyclable, so most of that would wind up being recycled. On June 8th of 2022, our primary regulator deemed these plans to be sufficient and complete. That does not mean that they were approved. It simply means that after looking at it for a long period of time, BOEM determined that everything that they needed to make a decision about the project to approve or disapprove was in those documents. And at that point, two things happened. One is that the documents became public, and they're available on boem.gov if you're curious and would like to look at them. They're great resources. The other is it kicked off a 2-year process where all of our plans are assessed against every major federal environmental law that exists. So this is clean water, clean air, the Migratory Bird Treaty Act, the Marine Mammal Protection Act, Magnuson-Stevens Fisheries Conservation Act, Coastal Zone Management Act, et cetera. It's also assessed for any impacts it would have economically, sociographically, environmentally. BOEM reports their findings on this through something called an environmental impact statement. And last September, they came out with a draft version of that document, which was our first blush at how they're feeling about the project and its potential impacts, as well as what they have to say about our approach to mitigating those potential impacts. There were 4 open houses for public comments, 1 in Ocean City, 1 in Dagsboro, 2 that were online. And BOEM took public comments until November 20. Those comments are also now public. And at this point, BOEM will take that feedback, they'll continue to analyze the plans, and sometime next summer or fall, they'll come out with a final environmental impact statement, which will be their final opinion on the project. Shortly thereafter, they will come out with a decision about whether to approve the project, disapprove the project, or approve it with some modifications. So essentially, at this point, and I should mention as well, BOEM is the lead regulator. The Department of Defense, the FAA, NOAA, as well as state agencies like DNREC, all are a part of this approval process. They all have a seat at the table, and all of the permitting process kind of will converge around the end of this year. Okay, so as far as what's in all this for Delaware. So there are a number of areas to discuss. One of the areas, so in terms of broadly to the state, some of you may have seen that we recently signed a term sheet with the governor that would bring a stream of benefits to the state in exchange for potential landfall at 3 Rs Tower Road and potential crossing of Indian River Bay. Those benefits include 150,000 free renewable energy credits each year. For those of you that aren't aware, Delaware, as most states in the area, has a renewable portfolio standard requiring it to generate a certain percentage of its energy every year from renewable resources. Delaware generates very little of its own power and correspondingly very little green power, and so the state meets these standards right now primarily by buying these renewable energy credits from other utilities, states that have surpluses of them. The percentage in that renewable portfolio standard tends to go up each year, so the amount of RECs that the state has to buy tend to go up every year. 2022 was the last year I looked at, and the state bought a little over 1 million total credits for a total cost of about $28 million. Most of that gets passed through to utility customers in some form. So what U.S. Wind will be doing is satisfying about 15% of that requirement at no cost. The present value of that, as modeled through a third-party consultant, would be $76 million. There's also a stream of programs that are valued at about $40 million that include dredging in the coastal areas, funding clean energy workforce training programs in local schools and universities, and a resiliency program for the state parks. That's the term sheet, and to get an agreement with the state, 2 things have to happen. One is that DNREC would have to agree to permit this. That's a separate process. But if they do, the state has to agree that with a permit, they would allow it to proceed. So we have our agreement with the state. DNREC still needs to do their piece and actually review and decide to permit that. Now, there's some other benefits that come along with just having this project there. One is that there will be lower energy costs for ratepayers in Delaware. Maryland ratepayers will pay for the cost of the electricity because it was a Maryland-instigated project. But where the electrons are consumed versus how they are billed are two different things. So by delivering those electrons to Dagsboro, the reality is that all up and down the peninsula, Delaware, Maryland, Virginia, will all be getting the benefit of this electricity. So when you turn on your lights in a few years, it will probably be clean power that is providing that electricity. And by bringing in a huge amount of additional supply, again, these third-party consultants have assessed that that will save about $253 million to Delaware ratepayers. It's actually a conservative number because there's a piece of that they don't include in the analysis, and that's the congestion fee. Right now, almost all the energy that comes down to us in southern Delaware comes through one corridor that parallels Route 1, and just like summertime traffic, when you're trying to force a lot of something through a single path, it can get backed up, it can get congested. When that happens, energy is lost, and if you look at your DP&L bill, you'll probably see a congestion charge. It's a toll that we all pay for that. We can't really model what's going to happen with that, but by bringing in all of this power from the east, we will need significantly less down that one quarter, and so the expectation is the congestion fees should go down as well. And of course, by displacing fossil fuel-generated energy that is really coming from our west and blowing those particulates over our state and creating air pollution problems, our air quality here will improve as well. In terms of energy infrastructure, U.S. Wind is going to invest $200 million to strengthen the local grid in order to make that connection possible. Typically, when utilities do this, that amount is passed through to the ultimate ratepayer. In this case, U.S. Wind foots the entire bill. And by doing this, we will control a lot of this construction. It'll be a boon to brothers of the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, who today, a lot of them live down in this area. Most have to travel out of state to find work, and so for a couple of years with our project, they'll be able to do that work here with their families. Additionally, that'll significantly strengthen and make the local grid more resilient. Our project, in terms of supply chain participants, our project is large. There are opportunities for a lot of companies. We are actively engaging with Delaware companies to make sure that they're a part of this process as well. We'll talk about the community benefits shortly. But U.S. Wind is also funding innovation. We've already jumped in and are working with Deltech and the University of Delaware on a program for offshore wind training that is going to be happening out at Deltech very soon. And we have contracts in place with the University of Delaware to use their really robust underwater ROV program to do various analyses that we need to have happen at our lease area. And then there are lots of indirect effects by bringing all this money into state that will create additional indirect and induced jobs as more cash is spent in Delaware. But let's talk about the benefits agreement with the towns itself. Yes, Mayor Mills.
Mike, let me just reiterate here that the first press release that went out had to do with the partnership between the state of Delaware and U.S. Wind. And it included in there the different description of the partnership elements that you talked about, including the mention of community benefit agreement. I just want to make sure that we all understand that that is on the state level. Now we're talking about a municipal community benefits program.
Exactly. Thank you very much, Mayor Mills. Yeah, two separate agreements, two different purposes. For the state deal, developers, that is essentially a real estate deal. So we have to go through a permitting process that's separate, but the state needs to agree to bring our infrastructure on board for the project to happen, and they have agreed to that. As we're talking with the municipalities, this is a community benefits arrangement, and it aligns with our corporate philosophy. And a lot of you have probably seen me do some form of this presentation in the past. This is an update. But from the beginning, for 2.5, 3 years now, I've been talking about that U.S. Wind sees itself as being a partner here for the next 30 or 40 years. And we believe that if you're going to be a member of a community, it's very important to do what you can to help that community thrive and grow. And it has always been an objective to have a benefits package in place with the towns, not one where U.S. Wind was making any determination about how those funds should be spent, but that the towns themselves could determine what would be the greatest potential impact for their own use of that funding. And so a while ago, I approached the Association of Coastal Towns with the possibility of having these discussions. They decided amongst themselves who would go forward and participate. There were 2 mayors that were chosen to meet with me independently, but those mayors then coordinated with the other participating mayors. We've had some basic discussions to shape up what we think is a good opportunity for both sides of this deal. And here's what it is. So the potential counterparts to the agreement would be, as Mayor Mills mentioned, South Bethany, Bethany, Dewey, Rehoboth, and Henlopen Acres. The length of the agreement would be probably just about 20 years. I say just about because the payment structure would work such that each town would receive $100,000 when U.S. Wind began its offshore wind construction. So when we begin installing the first monopile foundations, that first $100,000 will come out to each town. The second $100,000 will come out upon U.S. Wind's commercial operation date, i.e. when we start delivering power to the grid. And I expect that those first 2 payments will be shorter than a year apart. It won't necessarily take a full year for that to happen. But after that, for the next 18 years, on the anniversary date of that commercial operations date, each town will receive another $100,000 stream of cash flows from U.S. Wind. Now, from the town's perspective, the agreement asks that they do not exercise any discretionary authority to obstruct or delay the projects, and each town retains the autonomy to drop out of the agreement at any point in time if, for whatever reason, they would prefer to. At that point, they would just forego any future payments, and they would give back 2 years of payments. The reason for those 2 bullet points there is that while U.S. Wind has a very strong desire to partner with the communities and do what we can to uplift them, we don't want to fund legal opposition. And so those caveats are just there to make sure that we aren't putting money into the hands of someone that would then turn around and try to sue us. So I guess that's the essence of the deal. And Mayor Mills, would you like me to just stay up here for questions?
Yeah, if you would hang tight there. Just to let the commissioners and the public know that, as you said, 2 mayors work with you to try to tweak it with the knowledge that all of the ACT members are the ones participating. We're going to present it to their respective constituencies. So that's where we're at today. So this is not a done deal. It's something that U.S. Wind brought to us, and we want to present it to you. We, meaning Rehoboth Beach, Bethany Beach, will take it to their constituencies. And we just, all of us that are listed up there just happen to be doing it during this month so that we could try to resolve it if possible. My intent is to have us introduced to this topic today, which I think, Mike, appreciate you being here, so that we can put it on another future agenda. Our next meeting would be a regular voting meeting, so we would have the opportunity to vote on this if we chose. Otherwise, we would just continue the conversation about that. That would be our, Friday, January 19th meeting is when this would be on next. And we would want to decide whether we want Mike back again, to have him available to answer any further questions. So we will go to members of the public shortly. And in the meantime, we want to present it to the commissioners for any feedback. Yeah, Mike, if you would send us we'll embed that into our agenda.
A question for you, Mike. Thank you for the presentation. Are there any current other community benefit agreements existence elsewhere with U.S. Wind or your subsidiaries in the country?
Broadly, if we brought it to the industry, I'm sure that there are, but I'm only aware of what U.S. Wind is doing. We made an offer of this to a similar approach to Ocean City, and they declined. But otherwise, this is the only potential agreement in play right now.
So,
Commissioner, let me say that I'm making a note here so that we can research that, because I believe there are up north, Rhode Island perhaps or something. So community benefit agreement is not a new thing, but if you will, I'll try to research it for you.
okay. And in the draft agreement here, I noticed in some of the language, it's referred to U.S. winds Mar wind. Is that, who or what exactly is Mar wind? Thank you.
So we have, we won 2 separate awards. And so we've defined 2 projects. One we've named Marwin, and that's effectively a 309 megawatt project. That would be the first one that we would do. And we have a second project called Momentum Wind. The 2 projects collectively make up that 1,100 megawatt set of awards that we've won that we're pursuing right now.
And the other thing, just again, curious on this, you had mentioned about DNREC permitting and what have you. Do you have any idea of how that would impact the commencement of construction date? I mean, sort of which comes first or what happens?
Nothing can begin at all until every agency with jurisdiction over the project has signed off and approved it and allowed us to move forward. So that would have to happen.
And is there any projected time frame as to how long that process would be?
It began in 2017, and we expect it to conclude this year.
Okay, thank you.
Likely fall time period.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Commissioner Sharp?
I do. Could you just repeat what you just said about nothing can begin until all what?
Until all the agencies that have permitting jurisdiction over the project have approved it.
And since we have no permitting authority, that does not include us.
That's right. The municipalities don't have permitting authority in this matter.
Okay. Couple of other things. When do you anticipate, or do you know, when commercial operation would actually begin?
Right now, our projected plan would be to begin construction in 2027 and have that first 309 megawatts online in 27, and then that second project, Momentum, to begin and conclude in 2028. So 2027 with that first project is when construction should begin and the commercial operation date.
Thank you. And I'm kind of curious about this whole notion of taking it to the constituents, which appears to be where our current step is. And I really like the way the mayor launched into this about the fact that even though we've had one other presentation that I did attend, this is an initial really review for the commissioners and a refreshing that this will be before us in a certain time frame. So what I'm curious about is when you talked about the public comments having been ended on November 20th, yes? Did I get that correct?
Yes.
Could you talk about what level of or percentage of comments compared to other things, or how do we put in perspective whether or not the public, because I'm going to link some things together here. I'm just kind of curious how it stands up with other projects, if indeed that's a rational comparison. Because what I'm trying to figure out is here in the city of Rehoboth Beach, is there a component for Reach Out Rehoboth? Maybe you've already thought that out, to raise the level of awareness for our folks.
He's not familiar with Reach Out Rehoboth, if you want to explain.
Well, it's just our city of Rehoboth reach out to our own constituents to get feedback on projects and, areas of interest. So I'm not asking you this question. I'm asking the city and all the commissioners, and as well as Lynn is here from our communications department. Do we even believe there's a need to elevate what's going on here to our constituents in the city?
I'm not going to answer that yet, but what I will share with you is I am absolutely not an expert in this. But my understanding about this is that this is a federal project, and the feds, including BOEM, have leased this area off of Ocean City to them. So it's very hard. my understanding is very hard to stop this project if that's what
No.
your goal is.
No. Mayor, let me be clear what my goal is, that we're going to get calls from constituents, whether or not we enter into this kind of agreement or we choose not to enter into this kind of agreement, asking us one way or the other. So I'm just wondering, from a collaborative standpoint, if there is a need to raise the awareness of this piece. I realize this project is moving at a different, there's so many different layers to it, I'm hearing. So I just don't want to sit idly by and have folks, it's kind of like the example of the Rehoboth Beach Homeowners Association meeting coming up on the 13th, I believe, to give them a higher level of awareness of building and licensing. Well, this to me, over a 20-year period, is something that whichever way we go, folks need to be particularly aware of. I mean, I was uncomfortable with the press coverage that was going on this weekend of this upcoming discussion, almost as if it was characterized almost as if to say, the way I heard it, that the city of Rehoboth Beach was going to be making decisions today. And I thought the way you launched this was very smart, that this is not a decision we're going to be making today, but it is a decision that I would think we want our constituents to be highly aware of, unless others disagree.
No, I think that the more information we can send out to our constituencies, that's fine. The interesting thing is a little conundrum for me a little bit in that there's two phases of this, or I call it two phases. One is U.S. Wind's project down off the coast of Fenwick Island and Ocean City, which is pretty much, from what I understand, moot if all these permitting things go through. So we are likely not going to see any of the turbines. Where it's more critical to me is when Ørsted makes more of their proposals and comes up with their construction and operation plan. They haven't submitted that yet, have they? Do you know?
They have not.
When Ørsted submits their construction and operation plan, COPS, that to me is a more critical thing where we need to inform our constituency and reach out to them, because those are likely to be directly in our view shed. And so there's different levels of impact there. So this, again, the way this is written, as I understand it, is that we don't have to be supportive of the project or skeptical of the project to be able to accept this money. So I will share with you that sitting on the ACT, with the ACT group, when this was first presented to us, I expressed caution about moving forward in terms of does accepting this give the optics that we are supportive of it. I couldn't offer that because, number one, I don't know my opinion, but more importantly, I don't know the opinion of this board up here or our constituencies. So there's still more to be done, but I think the critical time frame is more oriented toward Ørsted's proposal. And the interesting thing is what we decide here may massage what Ørsted offers or doesn't offer. And maybe they offer the same thing. I don't know.
Well, and I will compliment your level of understanding and expertise, because all of what you just said of who's on first, who's on second, et cetera, I couldn't repeat that if you had a gun to my head. So maybe I'm the only commissioner up here that could not have an intelligent conversation with constituents about exactly what's going on, the different levels of this, that, et cetera, because I don't have that skill at this moment. So I'll just leave that for what it's worth.
And just to respond to that, from my perspective, Commissioner Sharp, if there's anything that I can do to help you with Reach Out Rehoboth or any channel that you would like to use to inform folks, I'm available with my time or could provide materials, whatever you would need.
Well, and I'm going to assume, since I'm not hearing any support from any other commissioners, that I'm the odd man out on this.
No, you're not.
Well, then, somebody tell me.
Well, I was waiting for you to finish.
Clarify support.
Wasn't
You're
talking.
talking about support of further informing our constituency via
Yes.
Reach Out Rehoboth.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm in agreement with you. If we're entering into what could be a 20-year agreement with $2 million at stake and giving up our legal, our whatever opportunities to take any legal actions that we might have, yes, my expectation is that we're going to get input from the public and inform them as much as possible. We just have to do it in a very methodical way because, again, as the mayor said, we could support this community benefits agreement, but not necessarily support the project. But the fact of the matter is, as Mike said, the comment period for BOEM has ended. So this project is either going to move forward or not move forward based on what BOEM decides. There may still be some comment period for DNREC and the state. I'm not sure. If there is,
That
we
is
probably
true, yeah.
we probably want to inform the public of that, but I think we just have to dissect this into little parts so people understand that one doesn't necessarily mean we're supporting or is connected with another. And absolutely, the more important project that our constituents are going to probably care about is the Skipjack project, which there will be many, many public comment periods once they submit their comp plan and it's accepted. So I think we just need to be very methodical and diligent in how we inform the public and make sure people understand that this is one separate thing from what could be coming down the road.
I'd like to clarify one thing, Commissioner, and that you mentioned it's a 20-year contract, and indeed it is, but there's also an opportunity to bow out at some point.
Yeah, absolutely.
We just have to, repay
2 years.
2 years' worth.
Correct.
Mike, I do have a question, though, and I might have missed it, but at this early stage, potential parties does not include Lewis or Fenwick Island. Why is that? Have they already said they're not interested, or have you made separate agreements with them?
They have indicated that they're not interested. You'd have to ask them for their rationale.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think by the time we have our next meeting, there will likely be enough media coverage where we can try to report on what Fenwick Island and Lewis have said about it. But I think we need to hear it in their own words rather than being.
Yeah, I just wanted to know if they didn't want to be a part of it, or there was a separate agreement that was being developed.
The former, yeah.
Yeah, there are no separate agreements. There is also a clause in the agreement, though, that offers the 5 towns currently participating a most favored nation status, that if U.S. Wind did strike a community benefits agreement with another coastal town, if that agreement was better than this one, then this agreement would be amended to step it up.
I really appreciate you guys preemptively doing that.
Anything else from the commissioners?
I have a question.
Commissioner Bennett?
Mike, this may be more curiosity, but in the spring of 2023, the Pentagon, particularly the Navy and the Air Force, has come out opposing all the projects in the Mid-Atlantic for wind farms. Do you have any update on that, or do you know where that stands at all?
I think there are a lot of opinions that are out there, but they all have a seat at the table in the approval process, so the project won't go forward unless
So they're
DOD
part of that as
approves
well?
it. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
I just wanted to, if I may, just respond to Commissioner Sharp. I think you articulated well your concerns, and I certainly agree with you in terms of what you're stating. I saw this presentation as more than anything informative. I did attend last year's meeting, and I found it very, very interesting and stimulating. But obviously it's an extremely long project with. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of twists and turns or delays or whatever. And obviously for it to get so many constituents behind it, and how you manage to do that is quite an undertaking. I mean, this particular issue with regard to the community benefits, I mean, it's dangling a little piece of cheese in front of us, but I don't see it as being all that, significant, in terms, at least financially, other than it may appease us in some way. But I see that more as like, kind of trying to address the political component of people being opposed, or seeing the degradation of or the potential perception of degradation of the experience of being on the coast, and I guess seeing wind turbines out on the horizon, and what's that mean to me, that kind of thing. I do feel, I'll express personally, I'm certainly in agreement with the project overall in terms of combating climate change and a means to, within a relatively short time frame, to be able to get off of fossil fuels and into renewable energy and so forth. But God is in the details, and certainly these are part of the details that we're going to have to contend with. So I mean, obviously we don't have to make a decision today, but I think it's great that we're being mindful of what's being presented, and maybe keeping us more attuned to the status of the project and what it means to us. It is a big deal. It's an extremely big deal, and I think we have to be informed to make appropriate decisions about it. So.
I think that for me, the challenging thing with Reach Out Rehoboth is I support it, but the challenging thing, I think, is what are we trying to do? Are we trying to inform only? Because that's the easy part. If we're trying to solicit opinions, what are we trying to solicit an opinion on? Because I think it's hard to separate, and it may be hard to reach out and get opinions or solicit feedback only on, do we entertain the community benefit agreement or not? Whereas I think a lot of the feedback comes in is going to be supportive or skeptic of it. And that's not what we're trying to entertain right now. We could, and that could be a whole nother story. I'm suggesting that is most likely would rear its head again when Orsted comes in front of us. So again, if we just want to inform Commissioner Sharp, I think that's easier than trying to solicit opinions on the community benefits program.
Could you refresh my memory when you were just talking about when you would expect that we might take a vote on this community benefit piece?
Well, the earliest we could vote, it would be the January 19th meeting, at the regular meeting. I know the members of ACT, again, are having 1 or 2 meetings each municipality to present this to their constituents. They're all intending to have voted by the end of this month. I don't see us having to rush ourselves that much, but I think giving ourselves the opportunity to do so on the 19th is fine by me. But as you know, during that meeting, this group has the power to defer voting to future time.
And Mayor, if we proceeded with that step, would the vote be to continue discussions or to continue considerations, or actually to say, no, we do not want to enter into a benefit?
Well, the actual vote, I think, would be, do we want to enter into this agreement with U.S. Wind? Because I think at that meeting, it would become obvious, hopefully obvious to me, that we're not ready to vote on it. And so we would just, nobody would offer a motion, and we would continue discussion.
If that's the case, that if there's consensus to go forward, that I would also ask that, again, if with respect to the other commissioners, but that our city solicitor review the contract for any,
That's in progress, yes.
it is. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Bennett?
One more question. Did the 5 mayors negotiate the 2 million, or was that an offer that you made?
It's been a negotiation. And, there are a few conversations to get to something that was actually tangible. It could then be presented to the towns.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else?
Yes.
Commissioner Preston?
Thank you for this presentation. Mike, just one quick question. I'm a very simple-minded person. Did I hear you say that one of the overall benefits of this bigger initiative is that our consumers' electric bills will go down?
That's the expectation, yes, because of the impact of, in two ways. The prices that we pay for energy are generally based upon the cost of the power and the cost of the utility maintaining capacity to meet peak demand. A great supply of energy into an area, just like with economics, you've got a great supply with the same demand, that capacity pricing is modeled to go down. And then in terms of how pricing is set for consuming energy day to day, Delaware belongs to a 14-state grid managed by PJM. PJM's job is to make sure that supply of electricity meets demand across those 14 states. Fortunately, it's fairly predictable, how much is going to be consumed. And so 95% of that is set up the day before, and the way that it is determined which energy generators are actually providing energy to the grid that next day is based upon the cost of the bid, and you bid based upon your marginal cost of energy. Clean energy projects like wind, solar, and things like that, our cost of energy is zero, which means that clean energy projects will always be the first consumed in that stack. And so as you have more and more zero marginal cost pricing comes in, that has an effect on the industry where, again, the marginal cost of that price, of that energy goes down. And over 20 years, like I said, the savings to Delaware by a third-party consultant were modeled at $253 million in those two areas.
Follow-up question. How soon would you think that consumers would start to feel the benefits of this?
That would be, post-construction, post-commercial operation date. So sometime in 2027 is when that would begin.
So when you turn on the switch?
Exactly.
Thank you.
So Mike, just a clarification, you very smartly used the word, that's the expectation on the benefit to the actual consumer. To me, expectation is another word for intention, and it is far from a guarantee. Am I correct about that?
I wouldn't say far. I mean, I would say, the laws of supply and demand are pretty well known and pretty consistent. So it is a strong expectation that will happen. But of course, many, many factors influence pricing, and we don't control all of them. So we certainly couldn't guarantee.
Yes. Okay, thank you.
Anybody else up here? If not, we'll go to the members of the public. What I'd like you to do is, hi, George, come forward one at a time. We have this microphone here, address the council. We'd like you to state your name and then your relationship to Rehoboth Beach, especially if you live inside the Rehoboth Beach, incorporated Rehoboth Beach, or if you live outside. And identify who you used to be and still are.
My name's George Bunting. I served representing Rehoboth for many years as a state senator, a cumulative 28 years serving 12 towns and 9 volunteer fire companies. In that process along the way, I served also with 5 governors. I disagree early on with what's being proposed, and I think you should give this thing a lot of time. First off, DNREC came along some time ago and wanted to bring the line in through Fenwick Island, which I'm familiar with, and the public rose up against that. They also wanted to put a restaurant out at Cape Open State Park. The public rose up against that. I've been working in Rehoboth, bought my business here with just me and a manual portable typewriter and an answering machine up here on State Road and Rehoboth Avenue. I'm also a minority property owner in Rehoboth Beach downtown. So I have some interest here. Carol's sitting here. I was president here of the Chamber of Commerce in 1979. I'm going to be reaching out, as others are going to be reaching out with the governor, and I highly respect John Carney. But I think the governor should not have done this. He should have worked it out through the General Assembly. We have a very transparent system. I worked on joint finance for many years and the bond bill for many years. The public throughout Delaware would come in and say where money is supposed to go. Believe me, there's a lot out there that needs help, and people need help. I'm a resident of Bethany Beach, Delaware. I have been for some time. I grew up in the Sussex County area, served in the United States Marine Corps, and my interests here are going to be strong for some time, hopefully. And I'd ask you to take your time on this. I'm not here to argue the pros and cons of wind energy and whether or not they should be offshore. Mine is, it should be, the process is a little bit flawed. The governor should let the General Assembly look at this in a transparent way. This is our democracy, and it should be open and transparent. Thank you.
Thank you, George. And as I intimated earlier, Bethany Beach would be conducting their own sessions on this, George. Anybody else? Would like to remind everybody that we're not here to debate or support or voice skepticism about the project. What we're asking is and soliciting is comments on whether or not to further consider the community benefit agreement before us.
Yes, my name is David Stevenson. I'm the director of the Center for Energy and Environment for the Caesar Rodney Institute. I noticed at the very beginning, Mr. Mayor, you mentioned about being an out-of-towner. I have to admit to that. I live all 5 miles up the bike trail in Lewis.
That's out of town.
While I'm not a resident here, I have a lot of interest. I actually started three businesses that my adult children run. All have many customers in Rehoboth. One of the businesses was a remodeling construction company. We would not bid on a project that would tear down a house, an old house in Rehoboth. We only bid on remodels. And by the way, we won some cottage awards. We love Rehoboth. We want to maintain Rehoboth. And that's one of the reasons I'm here. I've been working on energy and environmental issues for a dozen years. I've done it locally, nationally, making recommendations. I happen to oppose offshore wind, I'll be honest, because I don't think it's a good way to go. Rather do it with onshore wind, solar, nuclear, anything but offshore wind, which I find is ridiculously expensive and an environmental wrecking ball. But I won't go into most of those details today. What I would like you to do, I'd like to give you some food for thought. You know, I know we're talking about the U.S. wind project. We're talking about this is a project it's going to be visible, by the way. BOEM says in their reports that it's going to be visible from Rehoboth. But there's a very close tie between what happens with this project and what happens with the Orsted project. You know, once DNREC has issued a permit to bring power ashore, it sets a precedent that it's going to happen for Orsted as well. The only leverage the state of Delaware has to stop this project or slow it down is bringing the power ashore. DNREC can say no. And in fact, if they had left the Coastal Zone Act alone instead of modifying a year and a half ago, they took out, the Coastal Zone Act used to say you can't bring a transmission line into the coastal zone. It was the big lifesaver when they tried to bring a power line up north that was going to add $4.50 a month to electric bills, they used it to stop that. DNREC very quietly took that prohibition away about a year and a half ago. So it's a very tight connection between these two. So let's look at what's going on. First of all, just to answer a couple questions that came up, Nantucket, I know, has a community benefit. They got $20 million for that. I think they may be a little worried about it. Vineyard Wind is under construction. It's already started providing power. It's about the size of the Momentum Wind project. It has started. They had promised they were going to use something called the Aircraft Detection Lighting System, which is a radar system so that the lights only come on when there's aircraft available. They wound up not doing that. There are now flashing red lights off 10 miles, 11 miles off of Nantucket. So that didn't happen. And the same thing, by the way, U.S. Wind says they're going to use that. They said in their construction and operations plan they would use that system, but there's a clause, if it's commercially feasible. And right now, it is not commercially feasible. Unless U.S. Wind takes that clause out and says absolutely positively they're going to use that system, you should assume you're going to see flashing red lights, and Orsted will do the same thing. So it's going to be very visible. So one of the things to look at when the governor started the benefits analysis that Mike did, and by the way, I always like to say this guy is honest. He gives you exactly what is going to happen, and he's a very credible guy, and I like him personally. I wish we had time to be friends, and we're both in Lewis. So, what we're seeing is the potential for this visual problem that's going to have a very big impact. And what happened was with the state term sheet, they had a consultant, PA Consulting Group, LLC. I was able to get a copy of that report. If you want it, I have 9 copies I can hand you, and I'll send it electronically. I'm an economist. I look at benefit cost analysis. That's my primary job. I've been doing it for my whole life. And what I found was a lot of problems in that benefit cost analysis. First of all, this $2 million they're offering you, you need to take that to net present value. At a 7% discount rate, that's worth, what do they come up with, 10 million, $3.5 million, 3.7 million. So when they tell you you're gonna get $2 million, you're actually, in today's dollars, you're gonna get 700,000. So keep that in mind. Secondly, you're definitely going to get the money, but what's it going to cost you? In this analysis that this PA Consulting Group did, they assumed that there was going to be a savings in electricity. Well, the savings turns out to be $9 a year, which is 0.5% of your electric bill. Now, if you know anything about statistics, if you've got a 0.5% calculation for savings, but the error bar is 2.5%, then the calculation is meaningless. It could just as easily be 0. And that's probably what it's going to be, because one of the things they did not include the cost of backup power. So you've got wind blowing. The wind slows down. The generation stops. Every second of every day, you've got to have the same amount of generation as you have demand, or you're going to have a problem. So how do you do the backup? Well, there are backup generators called peaking units that run constantly at a low level, and if it's needed, they can be cranked up really fast. It's basically a jet engine. It's fired with either oil or natural gas, and it's really expensive and inefficient. It puts out more pollution, puts out more CO2, and it does it at very high cost. They didn't include those backup costs in this calculation. So, and plus, when you look at the statistics, the number is essentially 0. $9 a year is essentially 0.
How about sending me electronically that community benefits, and I'll distribute it?
I could hand the copies out
So
if you'd like.
I'm trying to steer you back to the pros and cons of a community benefits agreement.
So there's no advantage for electric. The renewable energy credits they're offering, this is supposed to run 44% of the time. And they have, that 44% of the time, they've offered all of the renewable energy credits to Maryland, as they should. So when they offer extra renewable energy credits to Delaware that will also reduce our electric bill, where are they going to come from? And the fact of the matter is, our regional grid manager released an estimate that these are only going to run 37% of the time. So they're not even going to meet the requirement for Maryland, let alone have extra credits for us. And that's $76 million worth of product that's a myth. The reason for these lower estimates, most of the power is generated in the spring and fall when electric demand is at its lowest. So there is going to be times, and all three, PJM, our regional grid manager, has said they're going to have to curtail production. They're going to have to tell US Wind, don't produce power because we can't take it. New York State did the same analysis, came to the same conclusion. Connecticut did the same analysis, came to the same conclusion. They're not going to be operating 44% of the time. And that doesn't even count the wind wake effect, which puts a shadow on half the turbines. So you're not going to get that benefit. So what's it going to cost you guys if, when Orsted gets built, you suddenly wind up with lower tourism? And I'll remind you, I was at that meeting back in September, and we heard from Jeremy Firestone from the University of Delaware, who wrote the study that BOEM uses to determine whether there's going to be lost tourism or lost property values. And the last thing, and it's on your recordings, Jeremy said, yes, there is going to be lower tourism from this, and there's going to be lower property values. He will never give a number. But we have numbers from elsewhere. University of Connecticut just did a study on onshore wind, and they found out that they would have up to 11% property value loss in the first year if you're close enough to visually see an onshore wind project. $1 million homes in Rehoboth, 11%, $100,000, one home. So you've got that potential risk. So you've got to be careful about what you do. The 2021 was the most recent year of the beach economy and tourist economy report. Our beach economy was worth $2.7 billion. If we have 1% lost tourism, that's $27 million of lost revenue. And that's lost jobs, that's lost tax revenue, all kinds of losses. So you really need to be careful.
Stevens, respectfully, I'm going to give you 1 minute to conclude, if you don't mind.
Well, let me answer a couple of other questions.
We're addressing whether we like wind farms or not, and we're trying to focus specifically on community benefits agreement.
Well, 50 New Jersey beach towns rejected that idea and actually wrote resolutions saying that the projects ought to be delayed until we get some answers on some very serious questions, including Cape May County. You've got 2 projects that are almost complete that we're going to be able to measure the impacts of what's going to happen to the whales, to noise, to horseshoe crabs, tourism, birds. Woods Hole Oceanographic Institute has been given $1 million to look at the environmental impacts. At this point, I don't think any of us should be making any commitments to either favor or disapprove of these offshore wind projects until we get the results of the projects that are almost complete. There's another one called South Fork Wind that's already up and running. We're going to have the answers to a lot of the questions about the problems or lack of problems with offshore wind in the next couple of years. I think you should be keeping your autonomy over the next couple of years and not taking for a pittance of $100,000 a year and giving up that autonomy.
Thank you, Mr. Stevens. Be sure to send that electronic version.
Would you like the paper copies?
Sure, you got them. We won't waste them.
And
Thank you very much.
Mayor Mills, would you mind if I addressed a few of the opinions that
yes, you may.
Mr. Stevenson raised? First of all, you mentioned aircraft detection lighting system technology and the clause in our plans. What that means is if it is approved by the federal government for use on offshore wind. That's all that means. We've stated over and over again, if it is approved, we will use it. It is approved for onshore wind as well as for use with tall towers onshore. We're just waiting for the approval for offshore wind, and between now and 2027, we are highly confident that that is going to happen. If it is approved, U.S. Wind will use it. No exceptions. Second thing, Mr. Stevenson mentioned the other community benefits in other towns. I misinterpreted your question. I thought you meant any that were actively going on right now. There have been some other community benefits agreements that were established, but those paralleled the agreement that we have with the state. They were effectively deals for the developer to make landfall in that town and have rights to real estate in that town. The backup power issue in terms of how it affects pricing. The consultant study, as with most studies, has to hold certain things constant. So there are also factors that could beneficially improve pricing that were left out of that. One of the issues, as I mentioned earlier, the stack of how energy is priced, and Dave is right. You have to maintain some reserve power there at the bottom of that dirty energy stack. David has kind of proposed that, well, there's no reason to pursue offshore wind because you're not achieving all of the benefits that you say because you have to maintain the standalone power. I think that's the completely wrong view of that particular piece of information. What should be done is more and more and more clean energy should be put into that grid so that you're pushing those dirtier forms of fuel further and further out of the stack to where they are completely decommissioned. And then your reserve power would be held with more efficiently started up natural gas, nuclear, things like that. So the objective, and what we have is the opportunity to have a hockey stick type setup. The more of that older power generating infrastructure we displace through bringing more green energy on board, the greater the benefits that we will receive, and that affects pricing as well. The credits that U.S. Wind has offered to the state of Delaware, 150,000 RECs each year. Those are guaranteed to the state. First of all, we have a high degree of confidence that we will be able to generate all of the credits that we owe to the state of Maryland per that agreement, as well as a significant amount more. If for any reason we were not able to generate the 150,000 additional credits that are needed for Delaware, it's on us to purchase those credits and give them to the state for free. Those credits are guaranteed. Time of generation. We've been studying wind speeds out on in the lease area at the height of the turbines for many years now. It's consistently 25 miles per hour out there year-round. We expect power generation to be strong all the time. Let's see. Well, in terms of property value loss, I haven't seen the Connecticut study. I'll have to take a look at it, but I have looked at a number of studies that looked in New York and Pennsylvania areas and found absolutely no difference in home price value or appreciation relative to areas that were outside of the viewshed of those onshore turbines. So I think, there are many, many studies that are out there. Most of those that I have seen have yielded positive views on what wind has done to the area.
Thank you, Mike. I'm looking at the clock. We have another meeting at 2 o'clock. It seems like a long way away. However, time tends to fly. We'll go back to the public. However, I'm going to be very rigid. We're not entertaining whether you support or are skeptic of wind farm. We're focusing on community benefits agreement. And if you can't do that, then I'm going to have to ask you to sit down. Yes, ma'am. Your name and relationship to the city?
Yeah, hi, I'm Mary Ellen Levine. I'm a resident of Lewis, and I'll say that I'm not really too familiar with the commission, so unless you've seen me bike by on your way to your beautiful beach, I don't think we've had a chance to meet. I'm a relatively new resident of Lewis, and coming from New Jersey, I know this was a conversation that was occurring along our state as well, and met with some resistance, and for different reasons has been stalled out. And I'm not here to talk about that. What I'd really like to talk about is that I'm really interested, as I'm sitting here, to know why Lewis was not part of what is that vote for an agreement. And so I would hope that you would share that concern as well. And I know I'll be looking into it, and I just wanted to make that comment. So thank you.
Check in with them, yes, ma'am, because they haven't had a public meeting on it, I don't believe. Yes, ma'am. Thank you for your brevity.
Hi, my name's Allison Ivoroni. I live in Rehoboth Beach. I've been vacationing down here since 1992, and I moved down here full-time in 2017.
Are you in the city limits of
I
Rehoboth?
am on the other side of the highway.
Okay.
I'm in RBYCC. First of all, Sure, sure. And I'm the 14th representative district chair for the GOP. Okay, so I, like Mary Ellen, would like to understand why Fenwick and why Lewis are not part of this. I'm a consultant. I've been a consultant for Fortune 500, 100 companies for my life. And I'm going to tell you this. I would never, ever let my client enter into this contract. It is a disgrace for the pittance of $100,000. That's nothing. And for you to give up your rights to sue, absolutely egregious. The worst contract I've ever seen. Thank you.
Thank you. Again, check with Lewis and Fenwick Island directly. Anybody else? Nope. We'll close the public part of this. Come back to the commissioners. So far, the path forward we've identified is on January 19th. We will continue discussion with the opportunity to vote. And then we want to, if everybody's amenable, we want to go forward with using Reach Out Rehoboth and try to at least advise and inform about this. Are you okay with that?
I honestly don't know at this point, because I think this meeting illustrates the complications of the nuance of what's in front of us versus overall reaction to the project to begin with.
And a lot of it is optics.
Well, and I don't want to muddy the waters any more than it may be muddied
Right.
after there could be some press coverage coming up on these discussions, et cetera. So I'm not, the original question I asked was nothing more than, is there a place in our discussion for Reach Out? Maybe the answer on this one is no, not at this moment. So I'm not interested in creating a morass of misinformation and false expectations. So I'm fine at the moment of just continuing this discussion on at the January 19th meeting.
Anybody, you were going to say something? No. All righty, we have a path that's set forward. Thank you, Mike, we appreciate it. Do we want Mike? Do we need Mike back at the January 19th meeting?
Yes.
Because
There may be questions.
He's also got Bethany Beach, South Bethany.
All of them.
All the bad things.
Yeah.
But I certainly would be happy to attend if I can be helpful.
All right.
So none of the other 5 have signed on, or the other 4?
No, in terms of just being available for their processes.
Thank you.
All righty.
Okay.
Thank you, Mike. We appreciate
Thank
your
you, Mayor
time and
Mills.
commitment. I'll be in touch. Thank you, all, everybody else. Now's a good time to get up and leave if you're not interested in the others. Thank you for coming. With that, our next, and back to the screen. So we're going to go back to old business and do that in order. Old business A, discuss renewal of lease with DNREC Division of Parks and Recreation for Deauville Beach.
Thank you, Mayor. Included in the agenda is the support document, which is the amended draft of the lease agreement for Deauville Beach. This lease agreement is with DNREC's Division of Parks and Recreation. You'll recall that quite some time ago, we were contacted by the Division of Parks and Recreation, and they have a desire to review this lease and update this lease to make it consistent with other lease agreements that they have for state park property elsewhere outside of the city. This is, I believe, the second time it's been before the Board of Commissioners and the public. Again, there is a revised draft included within the agenda, and I will briefly just touch on some of the amendments to the lease agreement that were made from the previous version. You'll recall that the previous version, it had not yet completed the legal review done. That has since been done. So I'll just briefly touch on some of the changes that were made to this agreement. First, on line 42 and 43, the city solicitor caught that the parcel number that the state of Delaware had for this parcel was inaccurate, so that parcel number has been updated. 334-14.09-215.00. Again, line 42 and 43.
Does that explain the difference in acreage, 21.56 in the original lease, and now it's 10 acres?
The acreage was actually updated to reflect the revised exhibit, I believe, as well. So you'll recall that the original lease that we had with Deauville actually pretty much started from north near Surf Avenue all the way down towards, I think it was Oak Avenue. So it was the entire property of Deauville Beach. But in here, we talk about the property and only using certain portions of the property. So the tennis courts, the parking lot, the dune crossings, and the beach. So that since has been updated in a revised exhibit. And there was one further change that I'll mention later on as well.
Thank you.
The next change was on line 75. This is under maintenance and investment in capital infrastructure. Again, it says that the city agrees to maintain and repair the capital infrastructure, i.e. parking lot, buildings, courts. We have added force main and air relief vault. Those are components of the ocean outfall. Next on line 84, we added act of God. So the city shall not be responsible for any damage caused to the property by natural causes or act of God. The next change occurs on line 125, protection of vegetation. This was just a grammar error. The original lease said no waste except in the event of emergency circumstances. So we removed no waste, and it's just in the except in the event of emergency circumstances. So that was an error that was caught again from amending the original lease agreement to the draft that's before you.
While we're there, on line 127 in the middle of the page, it refers to cute.
Cut, yes.
Thank you.
The line just below, the one that the mayor just mentioned, line 128, we have added without prior written approval. So this sentence says that the city shall not mutilate, injure, or permit visitors or any of their city's guests, invitees to cut, mutilate, or injure in any manner any growing trees, shrubbery, or other vegetation on the division's premises without prior written approval. So you will recall that Commissioner Markert has indicated that the Trees and Green Infrastructure Committee have planned to do an ivy cleanup. They have received written approval. My understanding is they've received written approval from DNREC for that, so we wanted to incorporate without prior written approval. Finally, on lines 282 and 283, this is termination for convenience. We have amended the 60-day period to 120 days. So the division may terminate this lease at any time by giving written notice of such termination and specifying the effective date thereof at least 120 days before the effective date of such termination, just to give us some additional time to plan for that termination. And that is all I have, Mayor.
Thank you. Commissioner comments? Yes, sir. Commissioner Bennett?
Evan, was there an analysis done as to what this will cost us now versus in terms of parking? I was trying to do it myself. So right now, is it $1 a year we pay?
Yes. Right now, we pay $1 a year. So in terms of cost, we typically bring in anywhere from $100,000 to $120,000 in parking revenue from Deauville Beach. So currently, the lease says that we will pay 10% of parking revenue from parking permits sold at Deauville Beach. So anywhere from $10,000 to $12,000 is what we could expect.
So we're going from $1 to
Yes,
$10,000.
that's correct.
And what if we decided we don't like this?
What I would do then is just convey the commissioner's desire back to the Division of Parks and Recreation and then just continue on with the negotiation.
And would they then take over the beach similar to what they do in North Shores?
Not necessarily. I mean, that certainly could be an option if we push back on the Division of Parks and Recreation strong enough that they were unwilling to work out some type of negotiation or arrangement with us. That certainly could be a possibility, but they have not indicated at this time that that is their desire.
Then my other question would be, I know we've had some issues with beach replenishment.
Sure.
We'd still be responsible for that. That's not going to be, will it be shared costs if we're leasing part of the beach?
So I made it very clear that what we are responsible for in terms of the beach itself at Deauville would be beach cleaning and lifeguard services. That's it.
Okay. And then I also read, are they looking for 10% of what we have with concessions or with umbrella rentals, any of that sort of thing?
They originally had requested 15% of parking revenue, concession revenue, and tennis court revenue, but in my negotiation with them, I was able to bring that down to 10% of just parking revenue, not concession and not tennis court revenue.
What if we offered free parking? I'll leave it at that.
Well, I'd like to have Evan review a few things first, and then I've got a lot of comments. Excuse me. This is, we've had a lease and a good partnership with DNREC for over 40-some years. So I think this is a terrible lease, and I'm absolutely not supportive of any of it right now. Especially this change in $1 a year to $10,000 to $12,000 a year. But I want to make sure that if the majority go for it, that a few things are looked at. One is I'd like to review the parking program. We right now have parking permits. I believe you can drive to Deauville Beach and buy parking permits, correct? You can buy a permit for one day, one weekend, or a seasonal permit.
I would have to ask June to clarify. I think it's daily permits and seasonal permits are the only two that we sell. At Deauville. Dailies, okay. So
Only dailies. Okay, that makes sense, because otherwise, if you were allowed to sell a seasonal, then we're giving them $27 for one car. So that's ridiculous. So again, the funding is limited to what's sold at Deauville Beach. Because again, we got to be mindful that you can buy a seasonal up on Rehoboth Avenue and then go to Deauville. So they don't get any capture of that revenue. Is that right?
That's correct. Additionally, the city also gives out free parking permits to property owners as well. So any parking permit, whether it's daily, weekend, weekly, or seasonal, is accepted currently down at Deauville Beach. I think this is dovetailing into some of our conversation for the special meeting tomorrow. But yes, currently any parking permit is accepted down at Deauville, regardless of whether the permit was purchased at Deauville or purchased elsewhere.
So that discussion perhaps tomorrow needs to be resolved before we go forward with any of this. Again, I come back to the lease. We've had a $1 a year lease for 40-some years, and now they're going to have only a 3-year lease going forward and 1 3-year renewal. That's just too bureaucratic for me. It's too short a time. The other thing they have in here is on line 6970 is the requirement for an audit. Well, that's a burden for a small town to have to do an audit and have somebody certify it. And so I would go for a flat fee. If they want to change it a little bit or increase it a little bit, maybe that's justified. But I would go for a flat fee that does not need auditing. So I can't support this percentage fee at all. Overall, there's too much extraneous or excess content. I think we have done an excellent job as caretakers for all those years that we've taken care of it. And I think we have done a fair job. And I just see DNREC as being very greedy on what they're asking for. And of course, I'm mindful that at the same time, unassociated with this, they're looking to grab extra money from municipalities for beach nourishment. They're looking forward to grabbing extra money from other municipalities in terms of permitting. I mean, some of the fees are exorbitant increases. And then now they're doing this to us. We're proud of our level of stewardship of the public lands. And remember, there's a uniqueness of this situation. There are public lands that they're asking us and to be stewards of that is within the city property. Now, I would like to know and research what other municipalities have public lands within their city limits that they manage. I'm not sure that there are any. The lease is way too complicated. It seems to be that this lease is designed for some of their parks, like the 2 restaurants down at Indian River Inlet, that are for profit. We're not for profit. We're certainly different. And this increase hurts us, It takes money away from maintenance at Deauville Beach. So DNREC, I think, should look to us as being a good partner and a caretaker. And I can't accept or support this at all.
Mayor, can you expand a little bit on, is there any other underlying motive that DNREC has other than revenue?
Not that I know of. Have they conveyed anything to you? No.
So it's solely for the purpose of, as the mayor just said, for increasing their revenue? Okay.
And again, I come back to, I think what, Evan, you conveyed at the one of the previous meetings is that they're trying to use one template for all their leases. And I am saying that one size does not fit all. We don't fit into that mold. And frankly, I think they ought to leave it alone. It ought to be the $1 because of the excellent effort and time and efforts that we put into maintaining that property for and on behalf of DNREC.
Can I add, this is a sidebar, but the Trees and Green Infrastructure Committee has organized a cleanup of Deauville actually we were going to do it this past weekend, but we postponed it because of the impending weather, and we're planning on doing it this weekend. We got approval from them. They're more than happy for us to come in and clean the place. And basically what we're just trying to do is to, clean up some of the vines and ivy that has kind of reappeared. It has been cleaned in the past, and we look at it as something that we routinely and, periodically would clean up. But it just seems like kind of a kick in the teeth that we're going to this trouble to get volunteers to spend their cold Saturday afternoons to clean up this thing that they're going to hit us up for, 10 grand or whatever. It just, a little irritating to say the least.
So how do we proceed? I'm just one person. We can send them back to the drawing board.
I agree with you, Mayor. How has the negotiation been, Evan? I mean, is it adversarial or is it?
No.
Okay.
We've worked really well together, and for the most part, I think they've been receptive to everything that we have offered them in terms of our comments. They have been pretty firm in terms of negotiating the revenue. So, of course, one of the first things that I did when I received the request for the 15% of parking, tennis court, and concession revenue was try to identify what are our revenues and what are our expenses at Deauville Beach. So at Deauville Beach, we've got expenses for lifeguards every single summer. We've got parking enforcement officers that are there every single day selling parking permits. We've got tennis court maintenance as well that has been in the CIP, that will be in the CIP for next year. We also have portable toilets, portable restrooms that we bring down to Deauville Beach to service the visitors to the beach. So total, we have, approximately what I estimated around $150,000 every single year in expenses. Now that excludes labor for the police department and for our public works crews to go down there and to maintain the dune crossings, maintain the beach, maintain the parking lot. Revenue, the big revenue generator certainly is parking permit revenue. I think the most we've seen in parking permit revenue at Deauville Beach has been around $120,000. We also have tennis court revenue, but that's minuscule. That mainly just brings in enough to cover the expenses. So that's $5,000 estimated for tennis court revenue. And then in talking with Katz and Lynham, Rusty Katz, trying to estimate what we think could be revenue from the concession stands there, would be about $6,200 as their portion of the entire annual fee that they pay the city to provide those services. So I expect that we are actually losing about $25,000 a year, that again, excluding police labor and excluding public works labor, just to provide the services down at Deauville Beach.
Commissioner Bennett, I also thought of giving free parking down there if we go this route where there's a percentage fee, just to send a message. I don't know what the response would be if they would, if this would backfire and they would take it away from us. I think they would be silly to do that because then it's going to cost them more money.
Yeah.
You know?
Right.
Or are they going to spend $150,000 to operate the beach each year?
Likely not. They'll close it, they'll most likely close it down. So again, for all the reasons I stated, I just can't support it. And I'm hoping that the majority here say that and we send them back to the drawing board.
So Mayor, can we articulate what we would get for the 10 to 12,000? Evan, I think you said we would have to give them. Do we get anything that we don't already experience?
No.
Okay.
No.
So what prevents us from holding the line at $1? They're not giving us.
With Evan's recent explanation of how much we do and what it costs us.
Right.
Yeah.
So we just say no. We're not getting anything. Your stewardship explanation that we've been a very good steward for this, and just say no.
Well, I think
Help
I
me.
think that needs to happen, and I
Okay.
think Evan needs to go back to them at the drawing board. But the people that Evan are working with are just doing the job that they were told to do. I think someone needs to pick up the phone, Mayor, and talk to our state rep, perhaps the Secretary of DNREC, and have a more one-to-one conversation.
Or be a part of the negotiations or
That's
something.
exactly what I would suggest is that, I'm sure that this is, I would agree, a boilerplate contract, and we're kind of Band-Aiding it to meet the needs and what have you, which always causes problems, not only in contracts, but in code. So the individuals that are negotiating are probably doing their exact job, and that they have relatively little flexibility, that's the word I'm looking for. But a contact with the secretary, DNREC secretary, to explain the history of this. It's a unique situation. It is not a boilerplate that's required. And the fact that Rehoboth Beach has been referred to the Main Street of Delaware, and the amount of revenue that is produced through the tourism here, I think is certainly a major consideration that needs to be emphasized in the renegotiation of this contract. And the simple question I would ask is, going from $1 a year for the past 40-something years to a much greater increase now, please help me understand why this change is coming about.
Correct. And if we were going to be amenable to a bigger amount, raise a bigger amount, I would certainly want to propose a multi-year raise, not in one fell swoop. I'm even willing to be bold and say I'm willing to, as long as we stay at this flat fee so that we don't have to do this audit, I'm willing to go out bold and say I'm willing for them to increase it 100 times to $100. but not to $10,000, for goodness sake. So,
I like that. Maybe that'll show up in the newspaper. That would be 100% increase.
are there any other sound bites for Chris that we can?
Well, I don't know.
Anybody else?
I would just, I mean, have we well articulated basically the shortfall?
Yes.
I mean, did they just kind of not blink, or is that really the response we got?
Correct. I mean, again, so what I was told by the division was that 8% of revenue is consistent with other lease agreements that they have. Again, the mayor alluded to some other lease agreements where they have restaurants and other concession areas actually operating, private concessions operating. And, the response I got was that they wanted to keep it at 10%. That's what they were happy with. That's what they were comfortable with. I didn't want to continue with any other negotiations or be any more aggressive without first this lease coming before the mayor and commissioners to get some consensus on how to approach that. So I do appreciate the feedback, and I think we can certainly take these comments back, and I can work with the mayor to take these comments back and maybe bring it to the secretary or a higher level of management in DNREC.
Okay.
Evan, did you say maybe bring it to a higher level, or we will bring it to a higher level?
Absolutely will.
Thank you.
Are there any members of the public who would like to comment? Oh, yeah, come ahead, Carol. State your name and relationship to the city, please.
So just for Carol Everhart, Rehoboth Beach, Deauville Beach Chamber of Commerce. Just a couple of things to keep in mind. One is the tourism. It is definitely a hot spot for both the residents and the tourists. And if we're going to make a change, we're getting close to visitor guides, all the printing going out and all of that thing. So I'm sure you'll come to the right conclusion. Thanks.
Thank you, Carol. Anybody else? No, so we'll come back to I think we have our path forward. Is that okay?
Yes.
Thank you very much. With that, we'll move to the next item of business. Conduct a year-end review of design manual for outdoor dining on public space and Chapter 215 restaurants for any desired changes. If you don't mind, I'll go first. Is that all right? There is a support document called Proposed Edits regarding the outdoor dining on public space. It's generic because we're looking at three things when we're talking about outdoor dining on public space. We're talking about the dining design manual. Excuse me. We're looking at a design manual for outdoor dining on public space. We're also looking at Chapter 215 restaurants. We're also looking at the application for that, so that if any changes are made, we need to go through all three documents to see if they need to be massaged. I just dropped all my notes on the ground. Let me. I'll use the screen here. Commissioner Gossett and I led this conversation, but we also want to let you know that Evan Miller, Scott Cantalupo, sorry, I can't remember your name, and Mary Ellen is also aware of this. The support document indicates that in terms of the design manual, there's mention that if you are a corner property, that you will set back 3 feet. Honestly, that's something that, something Patrick and I came up with because we designed the manual. But honestly, I think I goofed in establishing a 3-foot setback without actually going and look at any situations. So once I went out and took a look at Sirocco, for instance, hotel, and looked at their restaurant and a 3-foot setback, I realized that they're on a corner, They've got the street on two sides. They've got handicap transition points on two sides. They've got people that want to walk parallel to 2nd Street, parallel to Rehoboth Avenue, and cut the corner to get from Rehoboth Avenue to the other street. So the four of us, Scott, Evan, Patrick, and I went out and took a look at it so that we could physically visualize it and came up with a 7-foot change there. That's an extra 4 feet. Do you want to do any explanation? The explanation is that we just came up with the 7 feet, in that tends to allow for adequate distance between the handicap transition landing and the barrier. That's the primary.
Correct, Mayor. Within the public rights-of-way accessibility guidelines, there's a section R304.2.1 about turning space. That section pretty much articulates that at the top of a curb ramp, there should be a minimum of 4 feet by 4 feet turnaround space. And for areas where there are obstructions, it should be 4 feet by 5 feet. By establishing the 7-foot setback, that would give us a 7-foot pedestrian access route, which is required under the design manual, from the edge of that required turnaround space to the start of the outdoor dining barrier for the corner property. So that was some of the methodology that we used to arrive at that setback.
So that's for any questions on the first one? The second in the item proposed amendment has to do with really pretty much the application. Also, I think chapter 215 in the restaurant code. Right now the drawing elements are listed in there, and in addition to the drawing elements listed, we want to incorporate the elements that are within the buffer zone. The buffer zone includes scale drawings showing the area from the building facade to the street, or the streets if it's a corner property, including details within the buffer as designed in the design manual for outdoor dining on public space as, again, this is the definition of buffer, the area between the curb line and the pedestrian access route, which may contain obstacles such as ADA access ramps, benches, bike racks, brick, crosswalks, fire hydrants, grass, news racks, parking meters, pavers, planter boxes, stones, street lights, street signs, street trees, transformers, tree wells, utility poles, etc. You know, that these extra items would be added, I think would be a benefit to us as well as building and license to be able to scale the drawings, to be able to establish the pedestrian access routes and the minimum routes. And I don't think that there's any burden on the restaurateur to do this extra thing because it already specifies that the drawing submittals have to be done by an engineer or an architect. So minimal extra effort there. Any comments on this?
Mayor, on line 37, I think there's a period where there should be a comma.
Yes, there's right there.
Period ought to
Thank
be
you.
lowercase, right?
The last item we added after our on-site visit, and that was add to the design manual for emphasis, one extra question, and that is, are you a corner property, yes or no? And just a reminder that corner properties have a 7-foot setback from the property corner. Patrick, do you want to add anything?
Concur with the changes made. I mean, we went out and measured the space, and I went back later that day with an individual in a wheelchair to kind of walk through it and roll through it, and it would be a very tight fit when you have a sidewalk that's heavily traveled and you're trying to negotiate not only a wheelchair, but individuals with baby carriages. Also, people dragging materials from the beach, their coolers, their beach materials and everything. You know, we looked at it in December, so obviously there was not a lot of foot traffic, but try to envision that on a July or an August weekend, and I think that this makes very good sense. This is really the first example that we've had brought to us of a corner property to make us review this and reconsider what we've done, and as part of the design manual and the code that was written, that we would review this on an annual basis, and that's really what we're doing.
Mayor?
I have two amendments already. Line 42, corner properties have a 7-foot minimum setback. I don't want to establish that that's a dictate 7 foot, but a 7-foot minimum. The other thing I think we need to add on here, because this has not had a legal review, obviously, it needs to be written up as an amendment. And actually, for the application, I don't know that we need to do anything other than to acknowledge it. But the other thing I'd like added in there is that all these changes are effective immediately and retroactively. We only have one property so far that's a corner property. And I would say we'll work with them on modifying their outdoor dining area and lease agreement at no cost to them to make it very easy. But again, that it's effective immediately and retroactively. And we'll figure out what retroactive means, you know, a certain date.
Mayor?
Yes, ma'am.
To me, this is doing the right thing. I just have a question. On line 38, at the end of it, it ends with et cetera?
Yeah.
What's in the et cetera? Or is the et cetera
The et
really
cetera-
needed?
The et cetera is for the one thing that we forgot that somebody is going to come up with.
Okay.
And that's going to be covered. And
Leaving
and
us
the
that.
determiner will be building and licensing.
Okay, thank you.
Any members of the public want to comment? Oh, we got a thumbs up from Carol. Just state your name and relationship to the city.
Craig Thier, 102 Laurel Street. 2 questions, Commissioner Gossett. So the 7 feet, you're comfortable with that?
Correct.
Okay.
With anticipation of July traffic, foot traffic on there. There is enough maneuverability between a chair. I didn't have a baby carriage with me, but a wheelchair. But I think it is considerable enough space to move.
Good. The
And
second is
let me interject there. Let's be mindful that 7 foot is a distance from the corner, so that gives us at least 7 foot from the transition area.
Correct.
But also the maximum distance the barrier can stick out from the building facade is either 6 feet or 8 feet, depending on the table configuration. So that figures into it a little bit, you know, considering where Coast Hotel, Sirocco Hotel restaurant there, they have a 30-foot sidewalk, so that 7-foot distance sticking out from the building is minimal. But the distance from that barrier to the sidewalk transition is what's so critical.
Okay. So in the example that you're just giving with Sirocco, and just to make sure I'm understanding it, so you're right, they have the large area on Rehoboth Avenue. So how far out could they go? Could they go out?
The barrier?
Yeah. I mean, I don't want to say the barrier, but how far out could they do their outdoor dining?
Well, the design manual indicates that for outdoor dining on public space, there's a maximum protrusion from the building facade, whether the building facade is at the property line or whether it's back 2 feet or 4 feet from the facade sticking out into public space, which is a sidewalk space. It's a maximum of 6 foot for a 2-top table and aisle and barrier, and it's a maximum of 8 foot for a table for 4 plus an aisle plus a barrier.
Second question I had was, if they, are approved or are allowed to have the outdoor dining, are they required, can they just not take up the space and not do any dining, or are they required to, actively have dining?
If they have a permit,
correct.
I don't think there's any requirement that they be forced to follow through.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right. Just a question. I'm not saying I really
Sure.
have an opinion one way
Sure.
or another. I guess we'll see.
Sure. Very good.
Okay. Great. Thank you.
Any questions? Thank you, Craig. Carol, come on ahead.
Carol Everhart, Rehoboth Beach, Dewey Beach Chamber of Commerce. Just for the record, I've said this before, and it is absolutely true. Number one, thank you for all the work you did to make this happen and get it finalized. But they come for the beach. That's number one. But number two is absolutely the outdoor dining now.
Is that right?
It's very, very popular, so thank you for doing that.
You're welcome. We'd enjoyed it. If it hadn't been for COVID, who knows where we would be.
Mayor, I have a question about clarification. It's on page 18, it says following are not permitted, and it's the third,
Page 8.
page 18 of what I have, what I'm looking on.
I don't know. I'm sorry, I don't know where you
Four.
are.
Design manual.
Design
Of the
manual.
design manual. Give me a minute there.
As you look for it, it might be an easy thing to answer. It says what is not permitted is having split outdoor dining areas. It says, by example, having a pedestrian access route bisect two outdoor dining areas. So if you were a establishment with a center door, are we saying that you could not have outdoor dining on either side of the door?
I
No,
don't think so. The intent there is to not have the building facade, the outdoor dining area, pedestrian access route, and then another outdoor dining area.
Okay, so it's not the front footage against the restaurant then?
Right, so using the same Sirocco Hotel or Sirocco Restaurant example, they only have one center door, single door on Rehoboth Avenue. And we've approved so far one outdoor dining area on public space to the east of their door.
Right.
They could also come back and apply for one on the other side of the door. Is that correct?
Okay,
Yeah.
that's, all right, that's what I was hoping, but the way I read that, I wasn't sure, so, thank you.
Anything else?
So a question on that.
Yes.
I think what you've discussed moving forward through, are we going to look at the ordinance copy next? Is that what you want to do, or?
Yeah, let me go back up top here. Outdoor dining, we've done the proposed edits. Evan, where do you want to go?
We can certainly move into the ordinance if you wish. Just a couple things I wanted to add to the design manual. On page 2, we talk about the dimensions of the outdoor dining area, so that's where we will amend the 3 feet to 7 feet. On page 5, it talks about fees, so we need to clarify in there that pursuant to the ordinance that was adopted September 15th, 2023, renewal licenses are not subject to the $150 application fee. Additionally, the effective dates will need to clarify that the duration of the license agreement is set by the Board of Commissioners, and if it's issued by the city manager, that duration is set by the city manager. Same thing on page 6 under the license applications. Just making sure that the language between the design manual and the ordinance that was adopted on September 15th is consistent. Certainly, we will take a look at the application as well and update that language accordingly.
Up here.
Yeah.
Evan, just a quick, Mayor, just a quick question. What was the thinking behind no fee for renewal license? Is the cost to the city zero?
So I think the idea behind that was, so there is still a requirement that if it is a reapplication, so it's the exact same outdoor dining layout that was approved the year prior, if they are coming in for a reapplication, that they be approved without paying the application fee, since the application would be the same, but they would still be required to pay the annual license fee of $325.
Thanks.
Looking up here, where would you like to go next?
We can go into the ordinance if Commissioner Gossett has some comments.
Did you want to let him introduce the
Yes, please.
topics?
Go right ahead.
Under B here. I'm sorry. we'll let you introduce the topics. And then he'll,
215 is just
Yes.
open that up.
I don't have anything to really introduce. Chapter 215 is the section or the chapter on restaurants. Again, I kind of alluded to it earlier. That was that there was an ordinance to amend Chapter 215 back in September. That again addressed the concern about reapplicants having to reapply and pay a reapplication fee of $150. So that ordinance has been put into effect. So certainly we can entertain any other comments or questions on Chapter 215 restaurants.
are you addressing any of these up here?
No, so the draft ordinance I included only because in our online code, that ordinance has not yet been adopted or reflected in the online code.
So the draft here and the adopted ordinance, we
They're the
already
same.
did it.
Yes,
You're
correct.
just reiterating.
That's correct. And again, just for transparency, so if you were to go online now and download Chapter 215 restaurants, it would not reflect the ordinance that was amended from September 15th. So I've included the draft ordinance. I've also included the final adopted ordinance. Both are the same documents. One is just redlined. The other is the adopted ordinance.
Okay. Where would you like to go, Patrick?
I just a couple questions on it if you want to bring that up.
The 215?
Correct. Just line 34, if we can.
I don't know how to find a line 30.
That's, well, no, the embedded document, the ordinance version 3. Second one.
Right here, the red line?
Correct.
Or the adopted? Red line.
Outdoor. Yep, there you go.
Now remember, this is already adopted, right? Okay, go ahead.
All right, so that's fine then. My question is, in doing this type of thing, we also have with indoor restaurants, if you modify your floor plan.
Yes.
We don't have any, or I can't find a way that happens if you modify your outdoor dining plan, that you have to come back for a revision or what have you. Is that what we want to do? If it is, that's the way it reads right now, as I understand it. But 215.11 talks about modification of a floor plan, but it only addresses interior space. I don't know whether we want to address exterior space or not in that regard. And you can think about it.
Yeah. I'll try and address that comment. So lines 26 and 27, it says that if the applicant is currently a party to a license agreement with the city for outdoor dining on public space, so that is a restaurant that currently has outdoor dining, and wishes to modify the previously approved outdoor dining area on public space, they submit a new license application for outdoor dining, which has to comply with all the provisions of the chapter and the design manual. And those licenses can be issued by the city manager. Again, they're not subject to the $150 application fee. However, we also thought it was really important to include in here that in unique circumstances, the city manager may require the property owner to obtain a new license agreement from the Board of Commissioners. So I think the desire here was that if there was a restaurant, they currently have a license for outdoor dining area, they want to change a 2-top to a 4-top, or they want to change a 4-top to a 2-top, whatever it might be, as long as they comply with the ordinance and the design manual, that they can be approved by the city manager. Now, certainly if there was a different circumstance where they want to add multiple tables and maybe change the layout, the city manager can require or ask that they go back to the Board of Commissioners to seek a new outdoor dining area or a license on outdoor dining on public space. Again, that is a supplemental permit of compliance. That's your $1,250 fee for the supplemental permit of compliance, and that would require a whole new license.
I think what Commissioner Gossett was referring to, though, is referencing this 215-23 related to outdoor dining in 215-11, where it talks about modifications of floor plans in a more general aspect.
Okay.
So again, so we don't have two standards, perhaps. Come forward, maybe he has a comment on that, or?
I actually have a differing comment, so.
Okay, sorry.
Actually, what happens if the lease agreement holder does not choose to renew for that year, for the next year? We don't have that addressed in our in our documents yet. So if I'm a restaurateur, I do not choose to renew my license for the next year, but then come back the following year, I think a reapplication process. But should it be stipulated in the layout?
That if it's not renewed, if it's not renewed.
It's not renewable, I don't believe, at that point. I think you'd have to reapply for a new
If
license.
there's a lapse, then it's a new application.
Correct.
Yeah, absolutely.
Do we need to stipulate that? That's kind of my point for that.
Thank you.
Any other questions on this topic? All righty, we've got a path forward. We're going to go forward with these things, so we need to get them written up in draft ordinance form as needed. The next item of business is old business C, discuss amendments to the agreement of lease originally dated the 13th of December, 2002, between the city and Rehoboth Beach Historical Society to delete requirements that one member of the Board of Commissioners shall be a member of the Historical Society Board of Directors. There are multiple leases or multiple agreements made. Several of them, I think, indicated that there's an opportunity or that a commissioner shall sit on the board of the Historical Society. And this is the second time we're talking about it. The first time we talked about it, we introduced it, and we all agreed that it was prudent to remove that opportunity. The library has been advised of that. Evan chose to have the city solicitor rewrite an entirely new lease rather than to do a third or fourth modification. And so the main thing for me was to eliminate that section of the agreement that dictated, if you will, that a commissioner sit on the board. So interestingly, the way this is written, it's already removed, right? So you won't find it on there. So I don't know if they'll advise if there's anything else removed from it. Do you want to?
No, nothing. I don't think there's anything else I'd add. I just want to your point, Mayor, I think this was either the third or fourth amendment to a lease agreement, so I thought it made more sense to enter into a new license agreement that's reflective of all the previous changes so that we're not tracking 3 or 4 amendments for a license agreement. Get one clean document that's been updated to reflect all of those changes. So with that being said, I'll turn it over to the city solicitor.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Evan. The only thing I would add is that the only substantive change here is that the requirement that a Board of Commission member serve on the Board of the Historical Society has been deleted. Everything else is just essentially what was included in the 2002 agreement between the city and the Historical Society regarding leasing the building at 511 Rehoboth Avenue. It's referred to in this agreement as the old ice house. I did not modify any of the other provisions, so there are some things I might have added more detail, but I refrained from changing anything except the requirement to serve on the board. Thanks.
Very good. And tell me about the Anna Hazard House. Do we have a separate agreement with them that might have similar language? So we've only done half our homework here.
All right, correct. So the Anna Hazard House agreement is from the 70s, and it also has similar language, as you said. Out of abundance of caution, the agenda today references the 2002 agreement and amendments there too. So I didn't know if it was appropriate to address a 1970s agreement today, but I'm happy to make those modifications.
Well, what I'd like to do is put this again on the agenda for the February workshop. And we can just repeat this, but we'd have the changes to the Anna Hazard Museum so that we can vote on them both during the February regular meeting. That'd be all right?
Mayor, I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, it would be all right, but my question is on the board issue. as I was thinking about this since our last meeting, the only piece of information that I thought I did not have was, why was it in there in the first place? Does anyone know the history of why it was there or what it intended to accomplish?
No.
Is there anyone in our city that might know?
Yeah, I could probably ask former Mayor Cooper. Maybe he would know. So I can bring that at the February meeting.
That'd be really helpful, just to make sure there's not something for me that I'm not understanding or seeing.
Yes, I thought the same thing, so I did contact the former mayor with that, and I'd be happy to share a couple of his comments. He said his comment was, "I was unaware or forgot that the city had a voting position on the RBHS board. It is clear that the provision in the lease for the museum was a carry forward from the agreement with the Anna Hazard Museum. These two agreements are very different in their nature. The agreement for the Anna Hazard House uses the somewhat unusual phrase, quote, the privilege of supervising the operation of. In this case, the city has a much more significant role, being responsible for all maintenance, utilities, and insurance. With a term of just 1 year, the Historical Society is not expected to make a significant financial commitment." He goes on about some other details. But his conclusion, which I think is interesting, which we may want to address, is that in the context and representation with other outside organizations, is whether the city's representative is to vote their own opinion or what they think the consensus opinion of the commissioners would be, or to bring the matter to the city meeting and only vote once they have obtained the position of the full board of commissioners.
To me, it's just too complicated. I'd still rather get rid of it.
I agree.
Great.
I've rethought it as well since we've had the meeting, and I was contacted by a couple of constituents. I guess this leads to the purpose over, it is a city-owned building, and we have not had anybody on the board, though we were allowed to appoint somebody. And we still have that prerogative. And I'm of the opinion that, through my experience, if we give it up, we'll never get it back. And so my thought would be is if we kept it, seeing as though it is, what if it ceased being a historical museum, or for whatever reason they've decided to change focus, should we have a seat at that table? So that's kind of where I'm coming from. I agreed when we talked initially about taking a commissioner off, but as I thought about it, we had not appointed anybody, but we could. And I just think it's important to still have that leverage.
So would you be amenable to just leaving it as it is and not putting anybody on it, and then it's available?
Well, I think that's a discussion we need to have, but I think by eliminating it, we'll never, ever get it back. And it is city-owned property, correct?
Correct.
Yes.
Can I add something? I was given last couple of weeks a copy of their bylaws by one of their trustees, and there's, as far as I know, just from my scanning through it, there's no mention of it in the bylaws, which I found odd. That why would it be articulated in this lease agreement, but then not restated in the bylaws? And the bylaws, as they were provided, I really don't know like exactly when this copy that I received was in effect. It had a series of amendments, like dates at the end of it that said amended such and such a date, and it was maybe about 8 or 10 of these adjustments or changes made. However, I have no idea whether have subsequent, adjustments or changes have been made. So I really question, what that document means. But however, I would just say that it appears as though we're kind of maybe taking a little bit greater level of scrutiny with regard to wanting to know more about their strategic plans and so forth. I think it would be helpful to us to get copies of the bylaws. I don't see any reason why we wouldn't have, at least for these organizations, to have some sense of what their bylaws reflect. And what I found particularly interesting was the authority given to certain members of the board and especially the officers of the board. It seemed in this particular case that there had been changes made, I'm going to say the last couple of years or whatever, to sort of strengthen the role of the executive officers as opposed to the full board. So, and then I guess the other thing with regard to this discussion with regard to the liaison, is like, how do you define what your role is? I mean, I would look at the liaison as basically reflecting the interests of the city. Being a trustee would kind of like shift that role. I would think you actually have to take into consideration maybe what they would perceive to be best for the organization. But I think the liaison would be articulating, not necessarily trying to like speculate how it would play with us. However, I mean, that would be certainly on our mind, but I don't think that's something that, I would look at it basically as reporting back to this body as to like what I learned, what took place, what their thoughts are, so forth and so on. I mean, I think that's pertinent and that's what would happen. But the bylaws, I think, are a critical document, and I think we ought to be aware of it and knowledgeable of it. So,
Well, so far we've tentatively determined a path forward, and that is at the February meeting to have Alex bring back a first draft of an amendment to the anti-hazard lease. However, there's questions raised here, and before we invest in him putting his time into it, if there's no interest and we'd rather drop it, then I need to know.
Mayor, I have just a quick question that came to mind after I was thinking about Commissioner Bennett's suggestion, and this is really for council. Are there any implications for having the power to do something like that and not doing it?
So it's interesting, the way that the 2002 lease is written, paragraph 22 addresses this subject, and the Historical Society agrees that a commissioner will be on the board. So this body didn't agree that a commissioner has to be on the board. So I presume that this body could elect to just ignore that provision, and it's something the Historical Society agrees to and not the city. But perhaps a cleaner approach would be just to remove it. You have discretion there.
I'll just go out and say, after rethinking it and listening to this discussion, I see no downside in keeping it so that we would have the option to put someone on the board if we saw fit to do so.
I agree.
I'm okay with that as long as there are no legal implications for us not taking that action.
Patrick?
Yeah, I also agree with that statement, and it's hard to get something back once you give it up. But I'm also looking of commenting on Commissioner Markert's comments. I looked on the website of the Historical Society, and I was unable to find, it was a quick look, but any mission statement or actually their bylaws. And just what is going on of our neighboring community of Lewis, and that organization putting their building up for sale. Now, again, it's different circumstances, but I also think about some historical organizations that I'm involved in, and what if it may be addressed in the bylaws, which I haven't seen a copy of, but what happens if the organization is dissolved? What happens to the collection? What happens to the monies? Going forward, and I think if we're supporting that, there's nothing in the contract or this lease agreement that addresses any of that. And that is something that I think we should at least consider in our discussions. It may have any impact on the lease, if you will, but more and more historical societies, especially historic house museums, that type of thing, are falling into that area of dissolving because there's not a lot of interest or support. I'm not saying that's happening in Rehoboth by any means, but perhaps just as a standard lease agreement or some amendment to it or something of that nature, just that we need to talk about what if type of thing.
Commissioner Gossett, I agree with you. It brings me back to your conversation with the former mayor and his last statement about defining what is the person doing when they're sitting there. in the case that you just described, what if we have a member of this commission that's sitting as a member of that group, whatever they call it, whatever you call it, board of that group, and a decision is made to dissolve the organization as it is? Is that implicitly suggesting that the person who is there on behalf of the commission, or is the person there on behalf of themselves? What are they there for?
Is there a way, if it, does it have to be a commissioner that sits on there? Could, at the mayor's discretion or the board's discretion, appoint somebody as a representative to us that isn't implicated then as a commissioner, but still has interest, city interest in mind? I don't know if that's non-traditional or if that's something that could be done.
That's something that could be done. Currently, the paragraph 21 reads, "The Historical Society agrees that one member of the commissioners of Rehoboth Beach shall serve as a member of the board." So that word "shall" could be switched to "may" and give this board the authority to consider appointing someone to that board. That's one option.
I wouldn't go for that.
If I may ask you, Solicitor, would you read that entire paragraph, though, or that section?
Sure. So it says, "The Historical Society agrees that one member of the Commissioners of Rehoboth Beach shall be a member of the Board of Directors of the Historical Society to have full vote and voice on the Board of Directors of the Historical Society during the term of this agreement and renewal or extension thereof. Said member shall be chosen by the mayor of the city."
Thank you.
Still, that's a commissioner. I think it's moot because we've got a majority have said just leave it alone, so I think that's the direction we go. So, you have a comment?
Yeah, I think though, if there's still a desire to leave it alone, but with the intention that the commissioners may appoint somebody to the board, that the "shall" should probably be changed to "may," because I think the "shall" is a mandatory, if I'm not mistaken.
I agree with you, Evan, and that's the basis of my concern about a legal issue, because if you say you shall do something and you don't do it, I think there are potential legal ramifications for that. I don't know what they are, but I think that they exist.
I can easily support the change in the word there to "may."
Well, and then let's do that, and let's look at the Anna Hazard to see if it needs to mirror that. So be very mindful. Members of the public, would you like to say something?
I think.
No, your name.
Mary Tarlecki Dixon would be the one living person that would know something about Anna Hazard Museum property.
Right. Thank you, Bob. All righty, so we'll go for the one change in this and a commensurate change in the Anna Hazard lease.
And just point of information, the current lease runs through 2053.
Correct.
So I don't know if we want to address that at all, but just leave it as is, but we just recently ran into an issue with a 99-year lease that ran out, and we weren't aware of it, so whoever's here in 2053 that still can conjure up, I
I'm
think.
glad you brought that up because that was also a point I wondered.
Yeah.
I thought, is it 30 years? 30 years
It was a 50-year, $1 a year for 50 years. We took that from DNREC, I think. No, I'm sorry.
But are we comfortable with 53? Or
I'd just leave it alone, yeah.
Kick it down.
What do you mean, shortening it or lengthening?
I just think I think the 30-year lease seems to be long. I don't know if anyone else agrees with that.
Yeah, I mean, we're currently reviewing other leases in the town with real estate property and adding more of a business focus on it. So just something to consider. If we're going to have a discussion at the next meeting, that probably should be included in the discussion. I'm just
Agree.
All right, anybody else?
I've got one question. The last sentence of the paragraph that the solicitor read indicated that the mayor is the one who appoints a commissioner. I didn't see that language reflected in the Anna Hazard agreement. So is it the desire of the commissioners to also include that sentence in the Anna Hazard agreement when we amend the "shall" to "may"?
I would suggest that for consistency's sake, if you look at our other appointments for boards and commissions and committees, it is an appointment by the mayor with the approval of the commission. So again, that language is existing in a great majority of our administrative documents. So to be consistent, I think that would be the way to, if we're revising for both, yes.
Okay. Thank you.
All righty, next item of business, old business D, animal issue. These are the 5 advisory committees: animal issues, street and transportation, trees and green infrastructure, environment, boardwalk and beach committee. There were 3 components to this task, and that was to finish advisory committee reports on number 1, committee activity concluded in the past year or more, including agenda topics addressed, source of initiation of topics and disposition of same. Number 2, as part of the report should be including ongoing agenda topics started but yet concluded. And topic 3 was a list of potential future agenda topics, including how each topic was selected and what objectives are for addressing each topic. I know we've heard from, I think, tree and green infrastructure. We've heard from animal issues. Embedded in the agenda is the Boardwalk and Beach Committee. Ed, I guess you're still working on environment and.
Yeah, I have mine in an oral format. As I just looked at Mr. Legree's report, mine is certainly not in a nice format like that. So I can certainly get that done for the next meeting, or if you'd like me to give my oral.
Let's do it in writing for
Okay.
The February workshop, if you don't mind. The Boardwalk and Beach Committee doesn't have a chair, so the secretary and I think a couple members and the former chair created their list there. I don't know that we need to spend any time on it, but it does, and it only addresses one of the 3 items in the agenda, and that's committee activity concluded in the past year. So they don't have future agenda topics or anything. We used to chair the Boardwalk and Beach Committee, and I'm proud of the committee. It's many of the same members that are on it today. So this goes way back to 2018, I think. And I just wanted to read a few of the agenda topics and reports that we made. These reports are actually all on the portal. They've got, we made, that Boardwalk and Beach Committee made budget recommendations. They made an outline of what to do to rebuild after a catastrophic event. Bicycle routing on and off the northernmost section of Boardwalk. Specialty mats for dune crossings, they did a report on that. Bicycle mapping, I think they did that in conjunction with the Street and Transportation Committee. There was a report considering restroom attendance, those that attend the restaurants, restrooms. Committee report considering the new observation deck, which of course is being realized soon. Report on waste bins and recycling on the boardwalk. Notes about considering a PA system on the boardwalk and a safety video camera use on the boardwalk. They made recommendations. Emergency designated lane on the beach. Unfortunately, that we made a report on it, but that one was doomed to fail because the beach is just not wide enough to be able to provide an emergency lane for the RBP ATVs. Public restroom amenities, a changing room report, which have already been realized at Delaware Avenue and are being realized at Baltimore. Foot showers, trash collection, and bike racks. So they've been very active. I think they have been a very productive committee. The other thing on my list is I wasn't here at the last regular meeting, but I watched it. And part of the conversation had to do with these reports by Tree and Green Infrastructure and also Animal Issues. But one of the questions that came up is talking about funding of the projects and how to submit potential future agenda and who would submit potential future agenda. So we've talked about it before. Maybe we didn't remember some. Maybe we didn't conclude it. But I did this worksheet, and I'm calling it a template worksheet because it's a work in progress for submitting potential future committee agenda topics. My recommendations, as you can see, is, let me see if I can find it here. Is, again, this is for submitting potential future agenda topics for consideration by the commissioners, and do they get delegated to committees or not. So the template here, the draft template says topic title, give it a title, describe the topic or the problem or the challenge, give us a description of the impetus driving this potential agenda topic. Is it generated by the city manager? Is it generated by the committee? Is it generated by a city department or another commissioner? Will staff assistance be required? And who would be required? Is it the chief of police? Is it public works director? And what might their assignment be? So that we can kind of gather a timeline on this and how much effort needs to go into it. Possible funding if able to implement. That's a question that may not be able to be answered. There may be an answer that we don't expect any funding, and there could be a guess, but we don't expect anybody to put a lot of effort into it because this is just to determine, are you going forward in assigning this to anybody? The ranking of priority of the topic. Is this something that should be done? You'd like it to be considered in the next 3 months, 6 months, or is it something that should be immediate? And then the submittal of this form would be to the mayor for inclusion in a future public meeting for consideration by the commissioners. And the disposition of these could be that commissioners say, no, we don't want anybody to work on this yet, or no, we don't want any committees to do this. The commissioners would like to do this by themselves, or they could say, yes, we think this is great, and the Environment Committee should do it in addition to Beach and Boardwalk Committee. So there's different ways it can be treated. So are there any feedback on this? Yes,
Mayor,
ma'am.
could you repeat who you envision is submitting this and to whom are they submitting it?
Generated by city manager, any of the advisory committees themselves, any city departments, any commissioners, residents, pretty much anybody can submit them. But then again, and that's why we want to bring them in front of the commissioners so we can analyze their value of taking time, committee time, anybody's time, to advance analysis of these topics.
Well, okay. So when we agreed as commissioners that we wanted to have more say in the selection of committee topics, did you always envision that an advisory committee would continue to do their work in order to be able to fill this out and send it to the commissioners?
Yeah. But they have to be, I mean, they can be the one. Again, for the report submitted, animal issues, tree and green infrastructure, Boardwalk, we've got those so far. I don't recall any of them doing the third item on the agenda, and that was list potential future agenda topics. So that is still pending if they haven't. I know Boardwalk, for instance, on their agendas has had discuss future potential agenda topics, but they have yet to forward them to us.
So I think, Mayor, I may disagree with this approach in it being as broad and anyone can fill this out for any reason. My envision was that we're discussing something as a Board of Commissioners around this table, and we all agree, hey, we need to send this to the Environment Committee. Or I, as chair of the Environment Committee, either because I've heard something from city staff or one of my committee members decides to bring a topic here and said, hey, this has come up, is it worth for this committee to talk about? I think those are the only two avenues that I had envisioned.
Well, that could be an alternate that works. In other words, anybody, I would still say a resident, any city department, anybody can make a request, but what I'm hearing from you is that they need to go through a sponsor, a commissioner sponsor. And so if the city manager has something, he would come to the mayor. If anybody on your committee, even independent of the committee, or a friend comes to you because you're on street and transportation, then you would be the sponsor of that. So you would be the one filling out this form, so to speak. So I think that's a viable option too.
So can you walk me through how that works then? So someone submits the form, you receive it, you put it on the agenda, then we discuss it here in public and make the decision as to whether the committee should meet and discuss that topic. So that could be 3 months.
Doubtful. I would say, you would want it on a workshop, and the soonest workshop as possible. We could even say, hey, we're going to make a spot for it on the regular agenda,
And if all the topics
If they do the homework, the intent is it's a very short conversation because we're not trying to analyze it to death. If we find that it's viable and we don't want to send it to the committee, we want to talk about it ourselves, then we put it on one of the next agendas and we pursue it ourselves.
So for instance, I'll just use a real world example of the animal issues. The 3 proposals we brought forward all got tabled. So your vision would be, we would have filled this out back in March. It would have come here and the discussion would have been, we don't want to talk about those 3 things, we're going to table it.
And that's a possibility. And I know you weren't against this process because of the delay, I think, but.
Yeah, it's kind of mother may I. I mean,
Well, I think you have to, if you don't like this, I'm fine with hearing an alternative, but there has to be a way where we vet possible future agenda topics so that we can cull the amount of topics that we're talking about.
Yeah, I don't disagree. I'm just, I'll go back to Commissioner Sharnowski had presented the environment issues recommendations that all got waylaid, and the same with animal issues. So for me, this just seems like an additional paperwork assignment to, if there's no interest in hearing what the recommendations are from some of the committees, why are we having the meetings, which I think dovetails into the next topic of the committees overall.
But I think that's the exact point, unless I'm misunderstanding. If you had the 3 agenda topics up here,
right,
I think we would have talked about it. I would have said probably, I've talked about 2 of those 3 twice in the last 6 years. I'm not interested in them anymore.
Right.
And then if there was a majority that agreed, then we wouldn't have had you invest your time in it.
Right. I have no problem with that, but I guess what I'm saying is then the issue would be there'd be no meeting, essentially, of that committee until
Exactly.
Okay,
Exactly.
so
And that's the point, trying to cut down on the number of meetings.
Right.
You know, I mean, look, I think we recognize there's some committees that think they have to meet on a monthly basis.
Right.
And I think our point is they only have to meet as needed and as appointed, as tasked with something. You're next, Tony, so hold on.
I'm trying to calm my blood pressure at this moment.
Just one comment, Mayor, your proposed template worksheet, I think that concept is a great idea, but I would, as we address the next issue, we have an agenda item report that has been established by our former city manager and is being used by current acting city manager, and I think that is a template that works very well. The staff is familiar with it, and what it presents is also a historical record, so that when a topic that you mentioned, you know, I dealt with that 3 years ago and I don't want to see it again or something of that nature, we have that historical information. Right now, we basically have to go back through the minutes, which are copiously done, but it doesn't maybe tell the whole story of how much money it cost or why it was brought forward or something of that nature. So I think the template that is been introduced recently should be the template used. You know, we could tweak it a little bit for specific needs or what have you, but I think a consistency in how we prepare agenda items is a very good idea, and I'd like to see that move forward. With regards to the committees and meeting and what have you, I still think that well, we maybe just get into the next aspect of it. To see what the real accomplishments were. Now, the accomplishments that you mentioned and that you were reading out, I didn't see those listed in the current report.
No,
so
those were from when I was chair.
And I understand that, but I also look at the time too, with regards to the time of the city, and we really didn't have a true public works director at that time. We didn't have a communications person at that time. We didn't have an assistant city manager at that time. So the depth and knowledge and abilities of our staff have greatly increased over those years. So I really think we need to take that into consideration. Perhaps, again, I'm
You're moving to the next
topic.
aren't you?
But again, it's, well, I'm not trying to, but this is all one thing, to take the data that we have that has been produced by these committees and just compare it to exactly what we need to do for the future and looking forward.
Well, there's no rush, I guess. Let's move on to Tony. Would you like to start your topic?
I can. I wanted to comment on Commissioner Chernowski's remarks, and I basically support that because one of the things that I thought we had agreed to, and it is in this agenda item report, in the background portion of this form that Commissioner Gossett just referred to, is that I thought that when we agreed that we wanted more say in what the committees were actually trying to accomplish for the good of the city, that it would be more of a top-down approach. So the real differentiator in your thoughts, Mayor, and what this was when it was put together back on October 30th, as you can see on the form, was a more, rather than a bottom-up, it was more top-down. That's the summary in my head of where we left it. So the piece that is this agenda item is trying to answer the question, well, how would we do that? And we briefly talked about this before, that the how could be answered with, we have 5 independent committees at this time, as we all know. We could, if we chose to, have one generalist committee where you take 2 representatives from the 5 committees so that you maintain the passion that folks have. There may be folks that have more passion for the environment than they do for animal issues. But if you structured it so that the representation still preserved not only some institutional knowledge of what the committee had most recently been doing, but more importantly, you put together a group that as they talked about subjects, that in my vision, the commissioners would be the ones, as we went through a budget or even pre-budget, almost like pre-work, that these are the things we would like to have our city volunteers, our citizen advice on, so that we can push them forward or not. To me, it is a commissioner discussion. It's almost like a strategic planning event where you would determine what are the most important things for the commissioners in the next year, 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, et cetera. And that's how you do your prioritization of all the things we all have on our minds. And I'll give you an example. I was thinking the other day, well, what is the one thing that I really have some curiosity about? And I was going to talk to Edward about it as we come through the budget cycle is, well, you know, we do a July 4th event every year, and it's well attended, it's loved, et cetera. Is there any appetite from all of us that we start looking at transitioning at some point to laser shows, drone shows, all of the new technology that has brought just stunningly, if you look it up, stunningly beautiful and different and possibly more environmentally friendly. I do not know the price of it, so forth. But I would have loved at some point to have an agreement or consensus from this team that might be a way to go, and have a group looking into what are the pros, what are the cons, what kind of implications or any ideas going to bring up for the city. So all I'm trying to really define is this a top-down decision that we made? Is it a bottom-up decision? What is it? Because one of the other things that is listed on this sheet that's different from what we have done in the past is we have launched Reach Out Rehoboth. And if I think about, okay, how are we going to get Reach Out Rehoboth to put its arms around a virtual community that we're trying to build? What is it that we want to know from them? What is it that we want them to react to, et cetera, et cetera? So it has different components to it, but what's central in my head is how this is going to operate. And I thought we had it last time only from the standpoint of we did have a consensus, and somebody tell me if I misremember this, we did have a consensus that we wanted certainly more influence, and we did discuss top-down versus bottom-up and the challenges that we currently have with staff implications and so forth the last time we talked about this. So that's about all I have to say about it at the moment. My recollection is last time we talked about this subject, there were 4 commissioners that were supportive of looking into it, 3 others that were listening and listening intently, but had certainly not made a decision. And I think there were some comments of folks that were not in favor of doing anything different than what we have now. So it's really just, this is just managing our expectations. What do we want? And then acting on something and stop talking about it. Because I'm not going to talk about this idea past today. Because if it doesn't, it's just like the premise of this whole thing. If it doesn't have consensus up here, I need to stop wasting my mental and emotional energy on things that don't resonate.
I'm supportive of it.
Supportive of what,
I'm
Tim?
supportive of the proposal you have.
Thank you.
Being sunsetting 5 of the committees and going to a generalist?
Yes, yes, if that's the question on the table.
Well, I can say that I'm not in favor of that. I am very much in favor of restructuring the committee process and how things get, like you said, from top down, sort of, hey, we need you to analyze this, make recommendations. But I would just say, for example, the Streets and Transportation Committee, even the environment as well, there's so much different subject matter experts on that. Even when we just get updates on a monthly basis from the Chief of Police and Public Works on projects that are underway or in the pipeline, the questions that are asked, it's almost they would probably disagree, but a bit of a sounding board for those city staff members as well. So I just don't think that sunsetting all of them is the appropriate thing to do, but I do think that there needs to be more, we need to be more methodical and deliberate on what's being discussed, how much time it's taking, both from their time, my time, the city staff's time, all of that. And we don't need to meet every month just for the sake of meeting. Like, it needs to be as needed. So those are my thoughts on it.
So you're a no.
Commissioner Sharp, Mayor, Commissioner Sharp, I support what you're proposing here, if that's what we're talking about. I especially like what I think is a new feature, at least not something that I recall from previous discussions, of taking the current committees and pulling the expertise for the new committee from those. Yeah. That is particularly appealing to me, because I think what it does is mitigate against what Commissioner Chernowski was just talking about, which is, basically not taking advantage of the expertise of folks who really have it. And I think it's a nice complement when you have the various disciplines sitting at the same table, and they realize that we're one town with limited resources to do everything. And it helps, I think it will help them to also realize that not everything can be a priority. So I support this.
I'm just going around the room.
I like to put my 2 cents in. As far as, I'm just trying to figure out how the role of the green infrastructure, trees and green infrastructure, simply because we're kind of an advocacy group for trees and, the natural a particular natural resource of the city. And my frustrations with it, I'll share, and I don't disagree with at all with, who's going to run it and who's going to oversee it. And certainly, if you look at it as top down or bottom up or whatever, but I just feel like ideas about that certainly derive or originate from the mayor commissioners. However, we get input from other people. So I think it has to work both ways, in that we would send up to the mayor and commissioners if we got an idea about something, are you interested in us pursuing this? Now, I would also see that as something that we would do that if we collectively, the committee felt like it was worth, we're not going to send any old thing up. I think we want to see if there's consensus among the group that we would want to do a particular project or something like that. But the frustration I see is, I have a 7-member committee, including myself. I have difficulty getting 4 people to show up, so we end up doing things primarily with 3, 4 people, and in particular, and if we try to do something that I think is a little bit broader ranging, like we're going to do this cleanup thing, I have to enlist other people to join us. And I got some members from Environmental Committee to join. I got people from BIA helping. I got people from Rehoboth and Bloom that are taking part in this thing. So I'm going to end up with about, hopefully between 12 and 20 people that are going to help me out on this thing. You know, and to me, it's harnessing those volunteers, which I see. I was very surprised we're eager and willing and ready to help. You know, so I mean, I think we're, in a way, if we're trying to kind of distill this and maybe water it down, maybe that's not the right characterization, but, you know, there's a lot we can do with more people being involved, even if they're not officially on a particular committee. And if the committee would want to do things, activities and so forth, I think we've really been missing an opportunity on that.
Well, I can prove to you that we've been missing opportunities.
Yeah.
And it's in Rehoboth and Bloom.
Mhm.
I was there when there were several starts and stops as part of a city committee where exactly what you just described was happening. Rehoboth and Bloom never got off the ground, never. It got off the ground when it was taken and run with by a volunteer organization that has a passion for doing that. So, to my point, you've just made so many of the points that I've been trying to say that I think there's more support that there are improvements we can make. It's just how do we make them?
I think that's what I'm trying.
Yes.
Yeah.
So Bunky, which side are you on? Yes or no?
I would be looking for a means of making this whole process more effective.
Yes or no?
I don't know what side would do that, quite honestly. I'm conflicted about that.
I'm going to put you on both sides.
Okay, put me on both.
1 foot in each.
Yeah, well, give me a half for each side.
And then we're going to have to talk about how to interpret yes or no.
Yeah, right.
Patrick?
I'm supportive of it in developing a advisory committee as outlined with you with representatives from the current committees. But an aspect that I don't see addressed here, and it's probably premature though, is how does this become operationalized? What we have a challenge in many of our committees existing is we give them a committee and then we don't tell them what to do. And the expectations are different from our perspective and the committee members' perspective. So again, this is premature.
No, it's not.
Okay.
Because that is the core of the decision that we came to consensus on, stated in this document, recent agreement by commissioners to have more say in the selection of committee topics. So what I've mentioned several times before is we haven't taken the step to formalize this.
Correct.
And this would be the step to formalize it. But I'm just.
I think that the efficiency of one committee, an advisory committee, versus 5 committees that meet monthly on topic or what have you, but your description, Bunky, about this committee or group of volunteers to clean up Deauville Beach, that is a specific action, so you're going to draw people to that. There's, other than just having a reason to meet, you got to make up something. But if there is a compassionate project or true need out in the community, that's what spawns the volunteers and actions. And I think that's what this advisory committee would bring forward.
And I would presume that wouldn't be part of trees and green infrastructure.
I'm
Just
sorry.
be another group that would do that.
Part
right?
of what?
I said, I'm just using a cleanup project.
Exactly.
We would just get a group of people together and do it.
Exactly.
And forget you guys.
Exactly.
Okay, all right.
And all we would have to do is put processes around that. How is it going to happen? So that we make sure that we're doing it the right way and everybody knows the proper process. So, Mayor Mills.
I'm not supportive right now on it. I think we haven't given us a chance for the commissioners to manage the agenda topics as we've discussed. And I'm thinking about the 35 people that will be displaced off the committees. But with your program, that would perhaps only displace 25. Still, I'm more interested in committees, advisory committees with specific missions rather than a generalist mission. So and I would repeat what Commissioner Shernosky said. I think he had a good take on it.
Could I ask you a question, Mayor?
Yes.
How would we handle, for instance, 2 times this year, we've run into issues where there's committees in conflict?
And I've said before, I think that's normal. It doesn't mean we can't have a committee with Wilmington Baltimore Avenue Task Force with 18 on there that it's 7 and 11. You know, that would still be reported, and the commissioners do with it what they will. But that's a split committee right there.
Okay, so if the Environment Committee comes and says, we want to talk about the Dark Sky Initiative, and then the Beach and Boardwalk Committee says, oh, no, we're doing that.
No, they
No,
can't
that's what
say that.
happens.
They can't, yes, but our new program is that we decide whether it's
So who you
done or
giving it
not
to?
and who is assigned to it. We may just choose to decide to send it to both. Who knows? I know you don't
But that's where the
like that.
problems are. I mean, that's what's happened this year.
And
We've
I-
sent it to
and-
both, and
and
one
I
is
don't- and
one's
I
in
don't
opposition,
see-
and
I
nothing
s-
gets done.
And I don't see that as a conflict.
But there's no resolution to it. That's the problem.
It is the way, I will defend that by saying it is the way we do things.
Well, yeah.
However, it is certainly not productive.
No.
Yeah, it's
It is
inefficient.
not productive. And until we face the fact that it's not productive, there will be no change. Because one of the options on here that goes back to the original document, that's exactly why I use the original today, is under options or course of action, status quo, no change or to the current structure. If that's the broader, has the broader support, then we just need to stop talking about it and be comfortable with non-productive, irritating to many committee members when they work very hard and then it's not pushed forward.
I don't think anyone thinks that we should do nothing. I think everyone agrees that we need to do something to make this more efficient.
Do we? Do we? Do we? Everyone. Wait, I don't mean to interrupt, but everyone agrees that we need to do something to make this more efficient. Is that true, Mayor?
I started out my comments as we haven't given us time to manage the agenda topics.
To manage the agenda topics. I don't even know what that means in your head.
It means they're submitted to us, and we're the ones that authorize whether a committee invests their time in evaluating it.
So let me just get it straight. We would have some template, and it would be accessible by many different people. That's true, is it? That's true?
Restate that again, sorry.
We would have a template, going back to the mayor's document in here, we would have a template that a large number of people could fill out
Well,
from a committee, because
But according to Ed's program, anybody has an idea is welcome to it, but they share it with a commissioner sponsor.
What commissioner sponsor?
Any commissioner. If somebody has
Do
an
you see-
animal thing, then they would likely go to Tim because he was a former chair.
It's not different than what happens now, right? So a resident will email the city manager, public works director, and say, hey, people are speeding down my street. I want a silent policeman, or this needs to be looked at. They will forward it to me as the Streets and Transportation Committee Chair. And I will respond to them and said, hey, this is something we've already talked about. There's a broad traffic and parking study happening. we're going to get feedback on those citywide hang tight. Or there might have been one case in the past year where it seemed like it was something that was more urgent and important, and I said, okay, we're putting it on the agenda, we're talking about it, etc. The only difference now is, instead of just taking it upon myself to deciding whether or not the committee is going to talk about it, I'm going to bring it, if I feel like it may be talked about, I'm gonna run it by you all first.
If I feel like it.
As a commissioner.
Yes, but you have only one viewpoint. That was the whole discussion, I thought, about bottom up, top down. Top down would get that issue more, it would be more substantial, is what I'm trying to say. It wouldn't be the advocacy of something that I feel is important, or you feel is important, or Don does. It would be something we've come to consensus on.
Correct. But that request is going to come from somewhere. And it's only going to
It should come from us.
I understand that, but the initial requests, we may be informed of something that is happening, and we may all not know about it. We'll get a complaint, the city manager will get a complaint, something. My point is, it's only going to come from the top down if one of us raises it around this table. And that may happen on a topic we're already discussing. For example, maybe we're talking about the traffic study. And maybe we start talking about it and we're like, hold on. Let's have the Streets and Transportation Committee look at this and give us their recommendations before we continue. That is us telling them to do something and asking for them to come back to us with a report. Or during whatever period of time that we want to bring something else up, I may say, hey, this has come to my attention. I think it's important. Do you want one of the committees to look at it? That's my only point that I was trying to make. It needs to come before this body somehow.
No. I'm just, the Trees and Green Infrastructure Group started out as a community group that then got sort of sponsorship by being the Mayor's Advisory Committee on Trees. It started out in Sturgis Dodge's house. And I'm seeing it kind of going back to that.
Yeah, Bunky, sorry, Commissioner
I'm sorry,
Margaret,
yeah.
just a comment back to you. You said something earlier when you described this, and it bothered me then, and it's bothering me now. You said that you're alluding to that you called it an advocacy organization. I assume that we, as a body of commissioners, are not supporting and funding through city staff efforts advocacy groups. That should not be what we do.
We have a tree ordinance.
But that's not what you said.
Well, I'm just saying, but we advocate for trees. We don't, and the thing that was interesting about it, when the tree ordinance was being reviewed by the Law Oversight Committee, the Trees and Green Infrastructure didn't have anything to do with it.
Okay, so let me just say it this way. I would caution us to choose our words more carefully then in describing these things, because we should not be in the business of funding through our city staff's time and budget advocacy groups. That is not the role of a government.
Well, I don't know if that's really an accurate depiction of what they do. We do what this group does now as a committee that's appointed by by this body, and we have prepares minutes and organize meetings and all this other kind of stuff. I'm just saying, if you dispense with all that, you still have people that are interested in doing most of the things we do. So I'm just saying, is that better or worse? I don't know. I think it could be. I don't know. But you we're kind of walking away from it. I mean,
No, I
see the
disagree
mayor
with that,
commissioners
that
kinda
we're walking away from it. I think you're picking your best two. You know, you said yourself that you have trouble getting people to show up for meetings, and that you typically do it with, 3 or 4 people.
Right.
So in this case, you pick your best two, you put them on this advisory committee, the important
Well, but
committee.
I could get other people involved who may not be able to.
Sure,
Yeah,
I understand.
I'm just saying, it gives you more flexibility.
But if you pick your best two, you've got your best voice
One at a
sitting
time.
there.
Okay.
Thank you.
Right.
Okay. Speaking of being non-productive,
Let's see how we can advance this. We've got a 4-3 right now.
no, we've got 5-3.
Well, I'd like
We
a
don't.
formal vote
Oh, we do.
at the January regular meeting. This is a pretty big change. And then after that, if it's successful, which it very well might be, then let's maybe start planning, and I'm looking at you, Tony, planning on an outline on how to advance this for the February workshop meeting.
I think we should do it in the other order, if you indulge me for a minute. I would like to work a little bit more on where I think you're going, is more substance of how it could work.
The mechanics of it.
The mechanics, yes. And I would like to do that first, because I think it's unfair to put something in front of folks if it's not 100% fleshed out into what all of the different, changes or improvements could be.
Can you be ready for the February workshop
I will
meeting?
try. The first thing I'm going to do is look at the folks who are currently in favor as well as not, to put together maybe 2 people or 3 at a maximum, obviously, to kind of banter this back and forth in a more productive setting than we have time for right now, and come back again
Okay, just so.
with mechanics. Next step is come back with more mechanics.
Yes, and just so we know, the 5 advisory committees are generally on hiatus, although I've indicated to Bunky that for his ongoing agenda topics, that he's welcome to continue those. I would offer that.
I don't have one this month.
You don't?
No.
Well, my point is to the chairs, that if you have ongoing agenda content that hadn't been resolved, then I think you're welcome to continue with that, but not starting anything new.
Right.
Right.
We have an event that we're planning in March, so, for whatever.
Well, that event, I think, is different than your committee meeting. All right, anything else, Commissioner? All righty. Any members of the public have anything to say? We've got 2 members of the public. Thank you very much. With that, we'll move on to the next item of business, which is old business F, discuss an ordinance to amend section 9239B of the municipal code by increasing the citation amount for violations of parallel parking from $15 to $50, and to amend 92-80 by authorizing a one-time adjustment of the citation amount for certain violations of overtime parking from $30 to $15 if paid within the first 7 days of citation issuance. Evan?
Thank you, Mayor. You'll recall that this ordinance was actually drafted after consensus reached at the December regular meeting. At that regular meeting, we presented 4 different topics to the Board of Commissioners, and we received consensus to move forward with 3 of those proposed changes. The first, which is not on the agenda today, is the appeal window from 30 to 7 days. That will be on a future agenda, only because the solicitor and I need a little bit more time to identify how best to codify that requirement before, again, presenting it to the commissioners for consideration. So before you is an ordinance to amend 9239, which is parallel parking. You'll recall that the recommendation from the parking department was to make the parallel parking in the wrong direction fine consistent with the head-in parking requirement fine. And the consensus we heard from the commissioners at that meeting was to increase the fine for parallel parking in the wrong direction, increase it from $15 to $50. And again, that would be consistent with the head-in parking requirement, which is in Chapter 92. Also included in this amendment is on line 20. It says that any person charged with a violation under this section, the city manager or their authorized representative is authorized to receive or is authorized to accept and receive. Previously, it read chief of police. So just updating the code to reflect current practice as well as the increase in fees, again, consistent with the consensus from the commissioners at the last meeting. There is an escalation for this violation. So previously it was $15 within 7 days, then increases to $25, and then if not paid within 30 days, $100 after that time, or $50. So now the escalation is $50 to $75 to $100. And that escalation is consistent with other violations, again, that are $50 fine.
Evan, if I may, just one question on that, just the phrase on line 17, upon conviction, is that, as the citation is issued, is that the conviction?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
I listened to that meeting. I wasn't here, and I have a couple questions and a comment. Why do we even have that money can be given to the city manager or authorized representative? What's the point of that? Is parking's going to be closed, and we give them an opportunity to hunt down the city manager? Any idea?
So the language, city manager or their authorized representative, the city manager could designate the parking department to accept that money.
I think what you're proposing, Mayor, is just to eliminate it and just say that this is the
I'm
fine.
questioning the need for it, that's all.
I think
Got to have
that's
a
about it.
process. I mean, right, there has to be an established flow for receivables or monies. There has to.
Other fines don't go to the city manager, right? Where do other fines go to? Do they go to the parking department? Do they go to the judge? Well, that will be passé if this is adopted. Yeah, I'm just questioning that. And then I'll tell you, I hate raising fines on these things. I know everybody appeared to agree with the parallel parking in the wrong direction and the dangers it can cause by going into and out of that space and increasing the fine from 15 to 50. But I know we've got the majority to support that. I don't. And I tell you, I look at people driving around the neighborhood. They're driving. They finally get a parking space, and they're just as excited as can be, and they lose all their thought, and they park there, and they go into town. And here we want to give them a fine that, to me, is excessive, and so I don't support that.
Why have parking requirements at all?
I said it's excessive.
Well, let me just give you a piece of information. The day I drove home from this first discussion, off-season, I turned down Scarborough Extended, 4 cars parked the wrong direction. There was no parking problem. There was no eureka, I found a space. It was folks who decided it was the closest place to put their car, and I just burst out laughing in my car and said, it's the off-season. It's behavior that is, if tolerated, could become much more common, my opinion.
And I think, Mayor, we were discussing, I had seen it on First Avenue between Baltimore and Rehoboth, which is, dangerous to begin with because there's no stops there. But people park the wrong way. I just think we need to be strict on that. I'm more so strict on that than backing in.
Very good. Well, thank you.
Next was an amendment to Chapter 92, Section 80, violations and penalties. Again, we had provided an exception in here, which is provided in subsection B. Again, changing on line 36, chief of police to city manager, their authorized representative. But later, the new Part B, you'll recall that there was consensus at the last meeting to move forward with a one-time reduction if the reduction is made within the first 7 days of citation issuance. For any or for a violation of 9275 as a result of failing to pay for parking using the appropriate license plate. So that section now reads, for a first offense only, if a citation is issued for a violation of 9275, which is overtime parking, as a result of failing to pay for parking using the appropriate license plate, the city manager or their authorized representative is authorized to accept and receive without a hearing the sum of $15 as a penalty for a citation issued if paid within 7 days after the day the violation occurs.
Tim, I think I agree with you, if I recall correctly, that you didn't like the 7 days, you wanted 10 days, and I would be more amenable to 14 days, yeah.
Yeah, I looked at some other local municipalities, and it's over the board, but I think 10 was maybe average. My concern was, or my thought on this, and I'm still not supportive of the 7, is that if you're here on vacation, I don't think you're paying attention or you know what to do until you get home, and then you're going to write your check or whatever you're going to do. And so 7 days to me just seems tight. I think 30 is too long, but 7 to me just seems tight if you were down here for a week's vacation.
The only thing I would add to that is just keep in mind, again, jumping back to the appeals, the 7-day window is consistent with that first escalation. So if we were to change the one-time adjustment to be longer than 7 days, we would not only provide the $15 adjustment, but we'd also have to reduce it down from that first escalation that occurred as well. So it's just an additional step that we would have to do administratively to do that.
And you guys are the experts on this. Is it a big deal? I mean, is the 7 day, do people do it that quick, or do we find more people are getting fined because it's past the 7 days?
I would say, for the most part, when people receive a citation, they want it addressed immediately. It's, I would say, not uncommon for somebody to get a citation, throw it in their glove box, and then leave, and 30 days later they contact us. That certainly happens, but usually what happens is when they get a citation, they're on the phone with the parking department, or they're showing up in person to dispute it some way or the other. And that's all I have, Mayor.
Any other comments by the commissioners?
Evan, just on that note, did you guys do any market analysis on what other communities do? What sort of is standard practice?
Sure, I think June might be able to talk to that, but I think 7 days, at least for the appeal window, is relatively consistent with the other towns. So again, the one-time adjustment within 7 days, we wanted to be consistent with the day that the first escalation would occur. So that, I think the 7-day appeal window, correct me if I'm wrong, is consistent with other towns as well.
Thank you.
This will go forward for a vote at the regular meeting.
That's correct.
And is the next February workshop the point you would bring up the citation appeals?
Yes, that's our hope. Mm-hmm.
Walter, you have a comment on this topic? Parking?
Walter Birmingham, 123 Open Avenue. I hadn't thought much about this. I've read it before. But how long does it take to get the $15 in time today with the current rate? So is it going to encourage people, some people, I don't know how many people, to just not pay it and come back and complain and have it reduced to 15? Does this apply here? Because I think some people just ignore it and just pay it. rather than,
Correct. So
not challenging you in what you're proposing. You do a good job at it. So I'm just saying, but at a certain point, when it comes to $40, get it reduced to 15.
Right. So I guess 2 points I wanted to make. The first is, which I think addresses your question, I did have a concern about somebody who pays the citation within 7 days. They pay the $30, and then they come back to the parking department after they find out that a one-time reduction could have been offered, and now they want a refund of $15. So that was one of my concerns. I think we have addressed that because we say that the city manager or their authorized representative is authorized to accept and receive. So in that case, that reduction was not accepted by the parking department supervisor. There could be a case in which, again, that happens. Somebody pays the
Your homework.
citation.
Thank you.
And then the final thing too, the comment about the $40, in this case, a $30 citation escalates to $45. So on that 7th day, if we have not been contacted, the citation has not been paid, it would increase, it would escalate to the $45 as prescribed in the ordinance right now. Yep.
Anybody else up here? All right, very good. The next item of business is B on new business advisement that the Department of Natural Resources and Environmental Control has commissioned a study to explore the economic benefits of beach nourishment and to develop new approaches to funding projects needed to maintain Delaware's shorelines. Basically, this is, in my opinion, code speak for seeking additional funding from municipalities for beach nourishment. And again, personally, I represent ACT on this committee, but I'm just speaking personally now because ACT's formulating their opinion, ACT, Association of Coastal Town. My personal opinion is that the premise of this work study group is that coastal towns will be contributing to the cost ratio. Again, that's my wording, but that is how I interpret their premise. Also, part of their premise seems to purposely exclude analysis of the current funding mechanisms that they have now, where the state pays a percentage and the feds pay a percentage. I'm not going to get into it any further. There are support documents that show that there is a virtual meeting at 6 p.m. on January 18th. That's open to the public. I suggest any and everybody that is within our city limits take a look at it, because it could be that the outcome of this, if I'm right, is to seek additional funding, and to seek additional funding, we need to get that from somewhere, don't we? So, so take a look at that. I would suggest you participate and voice your opinion on it. Again, that's embedded in the agenda, this packet here. Let's see. With that, we have commissioner comments and announcements. Anybody? Review future meeting dates. Well, there's a special meeting at 2 o'clock today that will have a executive session. There's no anticipated business to take place when we come back into public session, I don't believe, right? So we're good there. And then otherwise, the first budget meeting is January 19th at 9 o'clock.
Yep.
Correct? And we'll be focusing on the 4 agencies seeking donations. And then at 2 o'clock on January 19th, we'll be having our regular commissioners meeting. Is there anything else?
As a comment, Mayor, with regards to the budget hearing on Friday morning, as Mr. Miller has emailed us all copies of the applications that we have requested this time. They're quite lengthy, but I think it worthwhile for all of the commissioners, please, to read them. Gives you some detailed information and better understanding of what the organizations are doing, and to substantiate the request for their cost, or their donations, which all have increased quite substantially from last year to this, so.
Very good. And Evan, are those contribution requests embedded in the agenda?
It will be.
Okay, so they will. They're very, very thick. Any citizen comments? If not, we'll adjourn this meeting at 12:48 p.m. Thank you very much.